Chapter 1526. No matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. This was especially so as Fang Qingshan's cultivation base increased. The further he progressed, the more resources he would need to consume. Ignoring everything else, just the eternal heavenly vessel alone was only at the sovereign grade. In order to break through to the immortal grade, Fang Qingshan had already integrated the mid-grade rank 3 spirit root, the ecstasy lotus flower. His other spirit treasures had also advanced to high-grade rank 2. This was the immortal level. In order to break through to the eternal level, Fang Qingshan was ready to integrate a top-level 3 supreme treasure. The amplification law, the dreamy chi, and the peak divine emperor skeleton were all prepared for him. What about after he reached the eternal level? Peak level 3 or level 4? Level 4. Just thinking about it was enough to make one tremble in fear. A peak divine emperor with a level 4 supreme treasure was invincible and could even escape unscathed from a venerable emperor. Moreover, many venerable emperors didn't have level 4 supreme treasures. For an ancient force like the Daoul sect, there were only 2 known level 4 treasures in the sect. One was the Daoul ranking, and the other was the Dharma treasure of the old ancestor that guarded the Jiaxing Tower in the secret vault. As for Fang Qingshan's eternal heavenly ship, putting aside the fact that it had mutated each time it broke through, it would obtain a few more divine furnace units than the other heavenly ships. Even if it was only the most basic 3, it was still 3 level 4 supreme treasures. Okay? They couldn't even empty the Daoul sect. Similarly, Mosquito Dorn's breakthrough was also a big eater. He swallowed the gate of eternal life and consumed a level 2 supreme treasure to break through to the divine emperor realm. He also needed a level 3 supreme treasure to break through to the venerable emperor realm. He needed a level 4 supreme treasure to break through to the venerable emperor realm. There was also the celestial chessboard, Fang Qingshan himself, and the world tree clone. Therefore, to Fang Qingshan, it was never too much no matter how many resources he had, and it was never too little no matter how little he had. To Fang Qingshan, resources were his life. Wasting so many resources was equivalent to murdering him for money. He deserved to be struck by lightning. Although many of the resources that were destroyed were not of a high enough grade for Fang Qingshan, a change in quantity could lead to a change in quality. But at this moment, Fang Qingshan was rejoicing because everything was worth it. Putting everything else aside, just the 10% or 20% of the destruction energy absorbed from the River of Destruction alone was comparable to the harvest from the entire Fallen Dragon secret realm. One had to know that this destructive power was at least at the peak of rank 2. In fact, the power of the core was at the early or middle stage of rank 3. Apart from the lair of the 3 dragon emperors, there were no other places in the Fallen Dragon secret realm that had level 3 treasures of heaven and earth. And it was precisely because of the destruction of all natural treasures, living creatures, dragon beasts, dragon monarchs, laws, heaven and earth, everything. So, it was able to stimulate the will of the heavens and the earth, and it was able to make the heavens and the earth go berserk. It converged all karmic luck and quintessence energy, and in the end, it was able to nurture a top-rate precious treasure like the Eye of the Last Days. In fact, Fang Qingshan already had such a treasure in his possession. That was the All-Heaven chessboard. However, the All-Heaven chessboard was a precious treasure condensed from countless fortuitous encounters and karmic luck during the last days. Even though it couldn't compare to the Eye of the Last Days in the beginning, its reserves and potential were superior. Not to mention anything else, merely the advancement of the All-Heaven chessboard. So long as the karmic luck was sufficient, the All-Heaven chessboard would be able to advance. If the Eye of the Last Days wanted to advance, then it could only be destroyed. If Fang Qingshan could use it to destroy the entire infinite void, no, just a large part of it, or even a small part of it, the infinite void, the infinite void, the infinite worlds, this supreme treasure could become the pinnacle existence in the entire infinite worlds. It might even be able to break through to the 5th level. However, he could only dream about such a situation. Not to mention that it was impossible for Fang Qingshan to accomplish it. Even if he had the ability to do so, he wouldn't dare to take the risk of universal condemnation. Otherwise, he would probably have to die before the precious treasure could even take form. After all, merely those emperors that intended to seize a strand of the quintessence laws of the heavens and the earth wouldn't end up well, let alone destroying a small portion of the boundless space. That would truly be courting death. If he wasn't eliminated, then the heavens would definitely annihilate him. Not to mention all of that, the Eye of the Last Days really didn't disappoint him. Even though it was only a single treasure, it was superior to the entire Fallen Dragon's secret realm. With this precious treasure in his possession, Fang Qingshan's timeless Arc Divine Furnace unit would have a new source of replenishment. Now, he had to figure out how to take this spirit treasure. Go! A bright glow flashed in Fang Qingshan's eyes, and he tossed the treasure fall coin over once more. At the same time, he utilized his innate divine ability, the reincarnation bracelet. The treasure fall coin shook, and then it seemed as if it had transformed into a money tree. Copious amounts of money sprayed out, and it transformed into a torrent of money that circled around the Eye of the Last Days. On the other hand, the reincarnation bracelet expanded in midair, and it instantly transformed into a black hole that emanated boundless devouring energy as it enveloped down towards the Eye of the Last Days. Unfortunately, these divine abilities and spirit treasures that had always been effective against spirit treasures in the past had completely lost their divine effects when facing the Eye of the Last Days. It seemed to have sensed the ill intent or danger of the treasure fall coin and reincarnation bracelet. The Eye of the Last Days opened. Swoosh! This divine eye emanated strands of dim light that shot out and appeared in space. It was slightly like the afterglow of the setting sun, but it didn't cover the sky with the rays of light of the setting sun, nor could it be said to be magnificent. It caused others to be unable to feel the boundless beauty of the setting sun, and they merely sighed with emotion as dusk approached. There was only despair before the arrival of night. It was like one's life had come to an end, and one was counting down the seconds as they waited for death. In the next moment, the treasure fall coin seemed as if it had lost all its intelligence, and it fell to the ground. This was the first time that it had gone for wool and come home shorn. Not only had it been unable to obtain the other spirit treasures, it had been swept down to the ground instead. On the other hand, the reincarnation bracelet wasn't much better. Bang! It transformed into a ball of fireworks and directly collapsed. The Last Days was a state where all techniques ceased to exist. Divine abilities, and spirit treasures were unable to be utilized, and everything would disperse and return to nothingness. It was truly, peerlessly domineering. Even though Fang Qingshan was mentally prepared for this, he still couldn't help but be shocked when he truly witnessed this scene. Regardless of whether it was the treasure fall coin or the reincarnation bracelet, both of them were renowned precious treasures and divine abilities that left nothing behind. Especially when Fang Qingshan's cultivation improved, the quality of these spirit treasures and divine abilities had improved along with it. In the past, the flaws of being unable to leave behind weapons or treasures of too high a quality had vanished in succession. That day, the treasure fall coin had even successively left behind 3 top-rate precious treasures in the Dao Intense Sect secret vault. Even though they were in a half-sealed state, a single spot was sufficient to discern how formidable the Eye of the Last Days was. However, a single spot was enough to determine the whole picture. This obviously showed how formidable the Last Days Eye was. It wasn't just its strength, it was the effects of its ability as well. If the Eye of the Last Days were to fall into the hands of another, then it would truly be a lethal attack against him. Chapter 1527. Fang Qingshan couldn't help but shudder, and he felt a lingering fear in his heart. Just thinking about it was terrifying. If it was the Grand Commander and the others from before, then even if they didn't have any other trump cards and weren't even able to summon the Grade 4 Supreme Treasure, the Emperor Executioner Saber, but if they were to utilize the Last Days Eye well, then it would really be possible for them to be buried here. Even if he had a way to deal with the Last Days energy, how could he make it in time in the warehouse? However, Fang Qingshan became happy again when he thought about it. It would naturally be a great calamity if this spiritual treasure fell into the hands of others. But if it fell into his hands, then he would have another trump card in the future. With this treasure, Fang Qingshan wasn't afraid of peak divine emperors or late-stage divine emperors. If he didn't have any special methods, then he would only be beaten up and waiting for death when he faced this treasure. Moreover, the higher one's cultivation was, the higher the quality of this treasure would be. Perhaps it would become another trump card in his possession besides the timeless ark, the all-heaven chessboard, and the reincarnation mirror. The timeless ark and the all-heaven chessboard weren't a big deal. As for why it was ranked below the reincarnation mirror, it was because even though this treasure caught his fancy, it didn't seem to be of much use, and Fang Qingshan basically didn't need it. It was because he had the timeless ark, so he naturally didn't need to use the other treasures as much as he could. Moreover, the reincarnation mirror wasn't used for offense or defense, but as a vessel for his grand Tao. Once it was damaged, the consequences would be severe, and it would affect his cultivation. So, under normal circumstances, Fang Qingshan wouldn't use the reincarnation mirror unless he had no other choice. But this didn't mean that it wasn't important. To a certain extent, it was comparable to the all-heaven chessboard and the timeless Arkansas. So, even though the last days I was extraordinary, it could only be ranked below him. However, now wasn't the time to think about all of this. The important matter at hand was to completely obtain this treasure. Because if he didn't make a move now, then this precious treasure would fly away by itself and look for the fated person that belonged to it. However, he had used the treasure fall coin and reincarnation bracelet to no avail. It seemed like he would have to use force if he wanted to subdue this treasure. Fortunately, Fang Qingshan had a supreme treasure, the eternal heavenly vessel, in his possession. This was a supreme treasure that did not belong to any of the myriad worlds in the universe. Even though the Eye of the Last Days was formidable, it wasn't able to truly render the timeless ark ineffective. Otherwise, unless Fang Qingshan's cultivation base could reach the peak of a blue-titled immortal emperor, he could only lament his incompetence and do nothing to this supreme treasure. Open! Fang Qingshan bellowed. In the next moment, the timeless ark suddenly blossomed with boundless light, piercing through the heavens and the earth. This glow wasn't dazzling, and it was like a dazzling sun. Moreover, it wasn't as despairing as the dim glow of the Eye of the Last Days. However, it carried a dense aura of vitality, and those who weren't in the know might even think that it was the glow of the quintessence tree. But at the same time, this light also emitted a supreme and eternal will that transcended everything. This was the energy that belonged to the everlasting lotus, eternal divine energy. It was exactly because of this energy that while the last days light of the Eye of the Last Days hadn't affected Fang Qingshan and the timeless ark at all, its effect had been weakened by over 95%, and it had become negligible. Go! Fang Qingshan issued a command in his heart, and then the Zhoutian star formation flew out. It expanded in the blink of an eye, and it transformed into a world that wasn't inferior to the fallen dragon's secret realm at all. It directly enveloped the Last Day's Eye. Fang Qingshan decided to place the Last Day's Eye into his world of stars, and then he'd rely on the world energy of his world to weaken and suppress the Last Day's Eye by 30%. As he watched the Zhoutian star formation descend, Fang Qingshan seemed to see a trace of ridicule and ridicule flash through the Last Day's Eye's pupils. After that, it emanated a dim glow that instilled despair in others once more. Unfortunately, this time, the ever-victorious dim light fell short of success. It hadn't been able to stop the Zhoutian star formation from descending, and it hadn't been able to turn the Zhoutian star formation into a useless piece of paper either. The reason it had failed was because the Zhoutian star formation was enveloped by a layer of eternal divine energy that was as thin as a cicada's wings. Oomph. Do you think I'll fall for the same trick a second time? Fang Qingshan couldn't help but laugh coldly when he saw the Last Day's Eye being stunned for a moment. One learns from one's mistakes. Since Fang Qingshan still dared to attack after finding out about the Last Day's Eye's might, then he was naturally very confident in his ability to succeed. Otherwise, he would have turned around and left by now. Suppress. As the world within the Zodion star formation expanded, the bell of chaos and red lotus of karmic fire flew out as well. Dang, dang, dang. The bell of chaos was struck incessantly, and then it merged into one with the sky. As soon as the red lotus of karmic fire bloomed, boundless fiery red lotuses bloomed and spread, transforming the entire world into a kingdom of lotuses. In the end, the Zodion star formation was only a rank 2 formation, and it was too weak when compared to the Last Day's Eye. So, Fangqing Shan fused the bell of chaos and red lotus of karmic fire into it to stabilize the world. Come out! After that, the eternal barracks flew out, and then group after group of eternal Tao soldiers streamed out. After experiencing the baptism of the river of destruction, these Tao soldiers had completed their transformation. 85% of them had become primordial chaos experts, and 15% had become eternal experts. These Tao soldiers took a step forward and fused into the Zodion star according to their previous experiences, and then the entire formation world was activated. With the assistance of these thousands of primordial chaos immortal Tao soldiers and the bell of chaos and red lotus of karmic fire, the world of the Zodion star had finally stabilized completely. A strand of pressure that belonged to the heavens and the earth instantly weakened the first layer of the Last Day's Eye. Even though it was only a single layer, the Last Days, I was a mid-grade rank 3 treasure in the end. Moreover, it was a top-grade mid-grade rank 3 treasure. It wasn't inferior to some high-grade rank 3 treasures. Even though such a treasure didn't have an equipment spirit, it possessed extraordinary intelligence. It seemed to have sensed danger, and it was aware that the Last Day's divine ability had lost its corresponding effect. The Last Day's Eye immediately changed its strategy, and it executed another divine ability. Even though the Last Day's Eye was called the Last Day's divine ability, it wasn't just capable of executing Last Day's divine abilities. At the same time, it was also an eye, so it had other eye techniques as well. Buzz! In the next moment, the Last Day's Eye closed and opened, and then a ghastly pale glow that was completely different from the dim light of the Last Day's divine ability shot out. Everywhere this ghastly pale glow passed was like the light of obliteration. Regardless of whether it was space, laws, divine abilities, or treasures, all of them were like snow that had encountered the sun, and they melted and disintegrated. Good, good. When he witnessed this scene, Fangqing Shan wasn't infuriated, and he was delighted instead. So long as the Last Days I was still within his control, then the stronger it was, the happier Fangqing Shan would be. Even though the light of obliteration and disintegration couldn't compare to the Last Day's divine ability, it was still a rare and peerless divine ability that possessed peerless might. Go! Fangqing Shan pointed towards a distance, and then he withdrew the treasure fall coin once more. Chapter 1528. Buzz, buzz, buzz. As the treasure fall coin flew out, the eye of the Last Days started to tremble violently. When compared to the calm and unruffled state it was in when it was trapped within the Zodion star formation diagram, at this moment, the eye of the Last Days seemed as if it had encountered its natural enemy. The reason for that was naturally because the treasure fall coin was just like the Zodion star formation diagram. It was enveloped by a layer of eternal divine energy, and it completely isolated the Last Day's energy. Without the Last Day's energy, the treasure fall coin naturally wouldn't lose its effectiveness. The treasure fall coin couldn't lose its effectiveness, so it was naturally the eye of the Last Days that should lose its effectiveness. As a matter of fact, among the magic treasures in Fangqing Shan's possession that could not be affected by the Last Day's power, there were only a few magic treasures in his possession. Other than the Timeless Ark and the All Heavens chessboard, there was the Treasure Fall coin. Treasure Fall money. Although treasures were dropped, it was still money in essence. Money can make the devil turn the millstone, and wealth can make the gods move. Even in the age of chaos, the power of money was incomparably great. Moreover, the closer it was to the age of chaos, the greater the power of money was displayed. The reason the Eye of the Last Days had swept him into the ground of dust just now wasn't because the ability of the Treasurefall coin was insufficient, and it was instead because the quality of the Eye of the Last Days was too far apart from it. After all, the Treasurefall coin was merely a top-grade rank 2 precious treasure, whereas the Eye of Last Days was a mid-grade rank 3 precious treasure, and it wasn't inferior to many high-grade rank 3 precious treasures at all, especially when it had just emerged into the world and received the favor of the heavens and the earth. It even erupted with the imposing aura of a top-grade rank 3 precious treasure. Even though it looked like it was made of wax, it wasn't really just impressive, and it was just slightly inferior when compared to a true top-grade precious treasure. So, it wasn't that the Treasurefall coin wasn't sufficient, and it was the Eye of the Last Days that was too formidable. But it was different this time. Firstly, the Eye of the Last Days had been placed within the formation diagram of the Jotion star, so it naturally wouldn't receive any enhancement. Conversely, it was suppressed by the energy of the heavens and the earth. The Treasurefall coin, on the other hand, was protected by the eternal divine power, making it the bane of all spiritual treasures. So, the Eye of the Last Days had only started trembling when it sensed the current state of the Treasurefall coin. Clap, clap, clap. A wave of the sound of a whip exploding through space resounded, and then numerous tentacles shot out from within the Eye of the Last Days. They danced about like a violent gale as they whipped towards the Treasurefall coin. The Treasurefall coin didn't have the slightest intention of dodging, and it directly collided with it. However, the Treasurefall coin wasn't slapped flying, nor did it erupt with a world-shaking bang. As if it had been completely emptied, the Treasurefall coin completely disregarded the Eye of the Last Days attacks, and it seemed to be moving slowly, yet was actually moving swiftly as it struck the Eye of the Last Days. Buzz! The Eye of the Last Days trembled, and it instantly seemed as if it was on the verge of collapse. Boom! However, Fang Qingshan didn't even have the time to feel happy. In the next moment, it was like a torrent had burst through a dam, and a river was flowing in reverse. The Eye of the Last Days had erupted with some sort of ability. With a slap, the Treasurefall coin that was stuck firmly to his body was sent flying. Seeing this, Fang Qingshan was a little dumbfounded. He had seen that the Treasurefall coin had always been successful, and he had also seen numerous treasures that the Treasurefall coin could not do anything to. But he had never seen someone who was stuck to it and actually bounced back. However, now was not the time to think about this. Almost subconsciously, Fang Qingshan took out all his treasures. Space froze, and time stopped. Space-time suppression. The Permitha bridge and passing lantern flew out. They complemented each other, and the energy of space and time fused together. A long river surged over from an unknown source, its whereabouts unknown, and a vast and mighty long river swept over. The entire world within the formation diagram of the Jotion star froze. The river of space-time. The Permitha bridge and passing lantern had joined forces to summon a river of space-time. However, just like in the past, it was merely the image of a tributary. Soul Tempest. After that, a pitch-black sickle soared into the world, and it transformed into a ghastly hell. Countless vengeful spirits, and malicious spirits roared. A storm that belonged solely to the soul swept out. In Fang Qingshan's opinion, the reason the Eye of the Last Days was difficult to withdraw was that it was because the Eye of the Last Days was very special. Besides the fact that his Last Days divine ability was very special and the quality of his body was comparatively high, most importantly, the Eye of the Last Days intelligence was so high that it probably surpassed even some top-rate rank 3 precious treasures. He successively revealed a variety of expressions such as impatience, panic, and so on and so forth. So, Fang Qingshan had made the Death Sickle execute a soul tempest that specifically targeted his intelligence. After that, another earthen yellow funnel appeared out of thin air in the sky above the Eye of the Last Days. It revolved incessantly and transformed into a tornado that connected the heavens and the earth, and it ceaselessly weakened the aura of the Eye of the Last Days. This was the effect of a 9 bends yellow river formation diagram. After that, the life and death gourd, the river diagram of the ancient book, the formation breaker drum, and various other spiritual treasures appeared successively, and they attacked the eye of the last days. Refine. In the end, Fang Qingshan withdrew the world cauldron. A cauldron with 2 ears for legs and 8 faces descended below the eye of the last days with a bang. Rumble. After that, a fiery glow flickered within the cauldron, and it shot up into the sky. In an instant, it transformed into a towering pillar of divine flames. Silver light soared into the sky and flickered. It forcefully suppressed the starlight of the entire world within the Jotian star. At the same time, the boundless sea of lotus flames on the ground seemed to have been drawn over, and the red lotus karmic flames converged towards the towering pillar of divine flames like moths darting into a flame. As soon as it was stimulated by this origin energy, the intensity of the flames within the world cauldron instantly doubled. At the same time, the world cauldron itself started to shake as well. The various talisman markings on it seemed as if they'd been activated, and a strand of terrifying energy rose and grew stronger and stronger. For a time, a strand of energy that could refine everything locked onto the eye of the last days. At this moment, besides the great void armor, the wishing pool, and the chaotic demonic horn, Fang Qingshan could be said to have utilized all his abilities. He utilized the world cauldron with all his might to refine and absorb the eye of the last days. As for the reason why they didn't use those treasures, it was because there was no place for them to display their skills. The great void armor was mainly used for defense, but it was used for offense now, so it was useless. There was no need to even mention the wishing pool. It was a complete auxiliary spiritual treasure that was completely useless. On the other hand, Fang Qingshan wanted to utilize the chaotic demonic horn, but he couldn't, because it was connected to the Timeless Ark's main body. At this moment, the Timeless Ark's main body had erupted with eternal divine energy at full force, and it was enhanced by the other spiritual treasures. So, besides exerting some suppressive force, it was impossible for it to attack. Since the Timeless Ark couldn't use it, the chaotic demonic horn was naturally of no use. Moreover, as soon as Fang Qingshan attacked, it was like a bolt of lightning. The entire eye of the last days couldn't help but surge. The enemy is strong, and I'm strong as well. Because of the eternal divine energy, the last days' divine energy wasn't of any use, and the eye of the last days responded to Fang Qingshan's torrent of attacks. Strands of ferocious and ghastly white divine radiance ceaselessly shot out from the eye of the last days. Chapter 1529. These divine halos were extremely powerful. Even the attacks of the Bell of Chaos and the Red Lotus of Hellfire, which had already advanced to the 3rd level, were far inferior to it. It seemed to be even more terrifying than the previous light of annihilation. It seemed to be an upgraded version of the power of destruction, or perhaps not an upgraded version, but the most condensed version of the power of destruction. Every strand of divine light was extremely sharp. They tore through the void and swept out in all directions. If not for the suppression of the Jotian star formation and the Timeless Ark, as well as the Treasurefall coin, he would have sustained some damage. Just this attack alone was enough to make people shrink back. But even after being weakened several times, his attacks were still shocking. The Permitha Bridge, the Passing Water Lamp, the Death Scythe, the 9 bends yellow river diagram, and other supreme treasures were struck by this divine light. The spiritual light on his body was like ice and snow in summer, and it easily melted away. It was enough to shock anyone who saw it. He was secretly terrified. Rumble. For a time, the sound of bells resounded incessantly, and the sound of explosions could be heard at all times. It was as if the energy of the light of the last days was surging wantonly. It was constantly changing, occasionally giving rise to storms and tides that swept through the surroundings, causing a large number of regions to be blasted into chaos. Buzz! The entire Jotian star world was shaking. The swaying Lotus Kingdom, after being engulfed by the flames like moths to a flame, suddenly withered like epiphyllum in the face of this chaos. At the same time, the stars in the sky seemed to shake off the dust on their bodies as they fell down. Puff, puff, puff. Blood splattered everywhere. Those were the eternal Tao soldiers who had set up the Zodion star array. Even the experts at the primordial chaos and sempiternal realm were crushed to smithereens the moment the star fell. Kacha kacha! The entire barrier of the world seemed to be overwhelmed, making a teeth-aching noise. Cracks that looked like ferocious, poisonous dragons spread all over the starry sky world. As for the world cauldron, which the last days I was refined, it was naturally the main target of the last day's eye. This was because this item had the effect of refining all things, and its assistance in refining was like adding wings to a tiger. Normally, the eye of the last days would naturally not care about it, but at this moment, it was very troublesome. Therefore, under his special targeting, the cauldron of heaven and earth was also broken, and the raging flames almost extinguished at once. Hiss! Even Fong Qingshan, who'd thought highly of the Eye of the Last Days a long time ago, couldn't help but gasp at this moment. What a terrifying Eye of the Last Days. Not only does it possess the grand divine ability of the Last Days that can isolate divine abilities, even its destructive attacks are actually so formidable. Even though it can't compare to the Panga Heaven's splitting axe, it's still extraordinary. As expected of the supreme treasure nurtured in this mystic realm. Of course, even though the Eye of the Last Days possessed peerless offensive abilities, it wasn't completely unharmed when facing Fong Qingshan's full-force attacks. Firstly, even though he had managed to break free from the Treasurefall coin, he had also paid a considerable price. Compared to the Zodion star formation, the suppression was much greater. Secondly, although the Timeless Arc did not personally attack, the suppressive force was not weak either. Combined with the power of heaven and earth, it directly weakened him by 20%. In the end, the Eye of the Last Days was only able to bring forth 70% of its might at most. Under the repeated attacks of Fong Qingshan's various precious treasures, the Eye of the Last Days surged with strands of scarlet red like blood, and it dyed the surroundings crimson red. It was even to the extent that numerous cracks had appeared on the Eye of the Last Days. Of course, when compared to the cracks in space, these cracks were too fine. Moreover, every time they appeared, it would only take a short period of time for them to be repaired. Alas, I never expected that it would come to this once more. Fong Qingshan didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he shook his head. He hadn't expected that the situation before him would actually fall into a stalemate once more. He was unable to refine and absorb the Eye of the Last Days, and the Eye of the Last Days couldn't escape or harm him as well. Fong Qingshan had overestimated his ability, and the Eye of the Last Days had underestimated Fong Qingshan's ability as well. It was to the point that it was extremely difficult for either side to retreat now, because it was like a competition of internal energy. Once one side retreated first, then not to mention whether the other side might seize the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Merely under the precondition that one hadn't defeated the other, one wouldn't just have to deal with the attacks of the other, one would even have to face the backlash of one's own strength. The slightest mistake would probably cause one to be unable to escape smoothly, and one might even fall into a bottomless abyss. The slightest carelessness would cause one to be in danger of perishing. So, the current situation they were in was that unless Fong Qingshan subdued the Eye of the Last Days, or the Eye of the Last Days defeated Fong Qingshan, or even killed him, or perhaps both sides exhausted their strength. So, Fong Qingshan smiled bitterly and shook his head. It was like that when he fought the Dragon Emperor earlier, and it was the same now when he subdued the Eye of the Last Days. In the end, it would depend on who could outlast the other. Of course, when facing such a situation, Fong Qingshan could be said to be extremely familiar with it. The only troublesome part was the problem from before. At this moment, even though he was in boundless space and was rarely visited by humans, it wasn't a place where birds flew all over the mountains and people were nowhere to be seen. So, who knew when someone would pass by? Once an outsider appeared, then it would be extremely troublesome. not to mention that it would delay him from obtaining the treasures. Even his life might be out of his control, especially after he'd annihilated the Grand Commander and the others. And he didn't know if the Martial Pole sect and the Freedom School would take any further actions. Unfortunately, there was no turning back now. Since it had already come to this, then no matter how worried he was, he could only maintain a stalemate for now. Otherwise, he would be annihilated by the eye of the last days before any other problems arose. That would be too unjust. Fortunately, Fang Qingshan could be considered to be skilled in such a stalemate. Moreover, he possessed two precious treasures, the World Tree and the Eternal Lightning Pool, so he could replenish his strength at any time. Conversely, the Eye of the Last Days would naturally be lacking in strength. So, if this stalemate continued, then he would sooner or later obtain the final victory. Drip, drip. Time flowed by bit, like the droplets of water beneath the eaves of a roof. Earlier, when he was devouring the energy of destruction, Fang Qingshan had hoped that time would slow down. At this moment, his desire to speed up was even more urgent. He had to quickly obtain the Eye of the Last Days so as to avoid any unexpected events. Good things didn't come true, and bad things always did. Blessings never came in pairs, and misfortune never came alone. He didn't know if it was because the Eye of the Last Days was too heaven-defying, but it seemed like the heavens and the earth weren't willing to allow Fang Qingshan to obtain it just like that. Right when he was about to completely refine and absorb the Eye of the Last Days, and he didn't even have the chance to reveal a trace of happiness when an unexpected event occurred. Crack! Suddenly, without the slightest sign, the entire world of Zhodian's star instantly split apart. The Eye of the Last Days that was on the verge of being refined and absorbed by him seemed to have noticed an opportunity, and it instantly seemed as if it had been injected with stimulants and erupted with power. The attacks from both inside and outside collided. For a time, Fang Qingshan was in great trouble. Chapter 1530. He'd failed at the last step. Who was it? Who exactly was it? At this moment, Fang Qingshan was truly unable to restrain his rage. He was even more furious than when he'd seen the Emperor Killer Saber. The greatest despair was when one discovered that it was merely an illusion after one saw hope. The greatest disappointment was naturally when one had expended tremendous effort only to have the last days I fly away. What a fellow! I'd gone through so much trouble, and I was just about to obtain the last days yet I never expected that a mishap would actually occur at the last moment. How could Fang Qingshan not be infuriated by this? At the same time, Fang Qingshan felt extremely bitter in his heart. He'd been afraid that a mishap would occur during the process of obtaining the last day's eye, so he'd taken all precautions and rushed over. Unfortunately, he hadn't been able to make it in time. When it rains, it pours. When the ship is late, it hits the head. It wouldn't be a problem if the intruder was just an ordinary person who wanted to take advantage of the situation. Most importantly, even though Fang Qingshan hadn't seen the person who'd caused this, a strong and unprecedentedly strong feeling of danger had arisen in his heart. The danger he felt from the Grand Commander's group of three while they were hiding in the shadows was simply insignificant in comparison to this. This was a form of danger where he had a slim chance of survival, or even a slim chance of survival. Could it be that they have someone lying in ambush outside? Could it be that they have something similar to the Emperor Killer Saber? Could it be that? For a time, a myriad of thoughts flashed through Fang Qingshan's mind. Of course, no matter how many thoughts flashed through Fang Qingshan's mind, everything had actually occurred in the blink of an eye. Similarly, no matter how furious he was or how unwilling he was, he couldn't change a fact. The last days I had escaped. He'd been barely able to suppress the last day's eye, and he'd merely relied on his endless supply of energy to delay the last day's eye until it died. Now that the Zhodian star's formation diagram had been destroyed and the seal had been removed, Fang Qingshan didn't have the strength to seize the last day's eye. For a time, Fang Qingshan was on the verge of spitting out blood and dying from heartache. The last day's eye, not to mention the last day's divine ability that could make laws, spirit energy, and divine abilities vanish. Just the other aspects of its attack were not inferior to an ordinary late-stage Level 3 Supreme Treasure. He had worked so hard, fought the Dragon Emperor, killed the commander, and narrowly escaped death. But now, he had fallen to such a state. Now, forget about collecting the treasures. The most crucial thing was that he was about to lose his life. Truly, after plucking 100 flowers and turning them into honey, it was sweet for the one who worked hard. It was like drawing water with a sieve. They had suffered a double loss. The Zodiac star's formation diagram had been destroyed, the Eye of the Last Days had struggled free, and the successive backlash caused Feng Qingshan's body, which wasn't in a relaxed state to begin with, to be in an even worse state. He was already considering whether he should use the all-heaven chessboard to leave immediately. Indeed, the sense of crisis this time was unprecedented. It was not just his sudden inspiration. His spiritual perception, nomological laws, spirit treasures, magical powers, and instincts were all warning him. But if that was the case, he was very unwilling. The Eye of the Last Days was such a formidable, precious treasure, yet it had flown away just like that. No matter who it was, that person would probably feel the same way. As the saying goes, men die in pursuit of wealth, while birds die in pursuit of food. Compared to Feng Qingshan, who was hesitant to give up his life for money, the Eye of the Last Days was much more astute. As soon as it escaped, it didn't take revenge on Feng Qingshan, who'd almost subdued it, and it directly transformed into a ray of light that tore through the sky and flew away. Could it be that it didn't want to take revenge? Actually, it wasn't that it didn't want to, it was that it couldn't. Feng Qingshan could sense danger, and so could the Eye of the Last Days. Moreover, this sort of innate intelligence was even more sensitive. Most importantly, it had just left the wolf's den and entered the tiger's. Moreover, it had suffered a huge loss of vitality during the battle with Feng Qingshan. So, it didn't dare delay at all, and it directly turned around and left. Unfortunately, it was still too late. Since the person in the shadows had broken through the formation, then regardless of whether it had any other objectives, one of its objectives was definitely to obtain the Eye of the Last Days. On the other hand, since the person in the shadows was able to make Feng Qingshan and the Eye of the Last Days be unable to resist at all, it was obvious how formidable the person's cultivation was. There really was no story without coincidences. Speaking of which, this person was on the same side as the great commander and the others. They were all plotting against the Tao sect. However, the difference was that the great commander and the others could at most be regarded as pawns, while he could not be said to be a chess player. However, he was not the one who came here to kill Feng Qingshan. The person who was sent here was still on his way, and his cultivation was not as high as his. He was really just passing by. It was indeed so. He had naturally received the news that the Tao sect had made a move in advance. The news had already spread throughout the sect, except for Feng Qingshan and Pang Bo. He ordered everyone to stop fighting and hide their tracks. He knew it too. However, he didn't care about it at all, because he was not a man of action. Passing by this place was just passing by. The real reason why he had appeared here was because he had been alarmed by the river of destruction, so he had come to investigate. After all, one could tell with a single glance that a great fortuitous encounter had appeared, so how could one miss it? Especially when even though the last days I hadn't been fully born, it had already revealed its ability. The last days, I had initially emanated the aura of a peak rank 3 divine emperor. Such a precious treasure was extremely attractive to peak divine emperors, and even ordinary emperor exalts. So, that person had directly flown over. It had happened not long after the 3 great commanders had been annihilated. Even though he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he had instantly understood what had happened, because he had seen the timeless arc and Feng Qingshan. At the same time, he had sensed his own aura, the aura of someone he was familiar with perishing. He immediately understood Feng Qingshan's identity. After all, he had seen Feng Qingshan's portrait in the past. The 3rd commander was on his side, and the trump card in his possession had been personally refined by him. Thus, everything became clear. He had intended to directly capture Feng Qingshan. However, He hadn't expected that the last days I would emerge at this moment. Thus, he had slowed down. After that, he was slightly disappointed when he saw that the last day's eye's true form was the same as Fang Qingshan's. Because even though the last days I revealed the aura of a peak rank 3 Divine Emperor, it was only at the mid-rank rank 3 Divine Emperor. However, the events that occurred after that had completely changed his opinion, and he was deeply shocked. The appearance of the last day's divine ability had truly shocked him. He hadn't expected that such a powerful divine ability would actually exist. Even if he was caught off guard and encountered it, he would probably have to bear the consequences. If he were to fight against someone at the same cultivation realm and was caught off guard by it, then he would truly be doomed. If the last day's divine ability was shocking, then the eruption of the last days I caused him to be even more tempted. With this treasure in his possession, it could become one of his trump cards. At specific times, it could bring about the effect of turning the tables and stabilizing the situation. So, when he saw that Fang Qingshan was about to refine and absorb the last day's eye, he had acted decisively. Chapter 1531. Buzz. The sky shook as an enormous hand that blotted out the sky took form in an instant. This enormous finger had distinct joints and distinct veins, and it seemed as if it was made of metal, yet was crystalline and translucent like jade. It blotted out the sky and covered the universe. Every single finger was thick like a mountain ridge and suffused with a violet gold brilliance, and a strand of extremely pure energy filled the heavens and the earth. The moment the huge hand was formed, it immediately pressed down on the void where the Zhoutian star formation was located. Immediately, the top-grade, second-grade Zhoutian star formation, which was supported by the Bell of Chaos, the Red Lotus of Hellfire, and tens of thousands of Eternal Tao soldiers, turned into pieces without a sound. In the blink of an eye, it vanished. Fortunately, he had the Timeless Arkansas. As long as the Timeless Ark wasn't destroyed, even if the unit of eternity was destroyed, as long as there was enough eternal power, it could be restored. Otherwise, Fang Qingshan would have suffered a great loss this time. It wasn't just the Eye of the Last Days that had escaped. Precious treasures like the Zhoutian star formation diagram had been destroyed on the spot. Even the Bell of Chaos and the Red Karmic Fire Lotus had been damaged. Wow! Fang Qingshan's body, which was already struggling to hold on, suddenly collapsed. Like a deflated balloon, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Peak of Divine Emperor. Clearly sensing this aura, Fang Qingshan's body stiffened. He gritted his teeth so hard that his entire face became distorted. Although he had long sensed that the level of danger this time was almost greater than any of the previous times, he still felt that the danger this time was far greater than any before. However, he was only guessing that there was someone like the Commander, a second ambush, or a trump card like the Archslayer Saber. But he had never thought that a peak stage Divine Emperor would personally deal with him. Although Fang Qingshan didn't know that it was just a coincidence, he could only blame his bad luck, but it didn't matter. Anyway, this person was indeed attacking him. As for how Fang Qingshan knew that this person was specifically targeting him, and not someone else who just happened to be passing by. Not to mention the fact that this person's aura was similar to the aura of the third commander's talisman. If they weren't targeting me, then why would they attack me at the same time that they were capturing the Eye of the Last Days? Moreover, they were trying to kill me. That's right, as this giant hand reached for the treasure, it was also descending towards him. What was this? Although Fang Qingshan was infuriated that his treasure had been stolen, he could only blame himself for being inferior. He would just have to seek revenge in the future. This was not giving him any chance of survival at all. At this moment, Fang Qingshan did not know whether he should cry or laugh, whether he should hate or feel honored. In order to deal with a person who was not even a God Emperor, these people had really put in a lot of effort. Not only did the three forces send out a deity emperor each, but they also had all kinds of trump cards. There were talismans that could restrain and seal the strength of a late divine emperor, the origin chi of a peak grade 3 offensive supreme treasure, a peak grade 3 defensive supreme treasure, and even the shadow of a peak grade 4 supreme treasure. Now, a peak god emperor had appeared. Fang Qingshan really didn't know what to say at this moment. He could only blame himself for being too unlucky and lacking in strength. If his luck wasn't too bad, how could he have encountered so much danger? If his strength wasn't insufficient, how could he have encountered so much trouble? Very good, very good. If I don't die, then I swear that I'm not a man until I kill all of you. Fang Qingshan became ruthless in his heart. Of course, he didn't shout out loud because doing that would only cause him to lose even more face. He would suddenly be ridiculed by others, and it would strengthen their resolution to kill him. He just swore in his heart. So what if you're a peak god emperor if you want to kill me? I won't allow myself to be captured without putting up a fight. That enormous hand suddenly stretched out and grabbed towards the eye of the last days. Its fingers were like the sky, and the net of the heavens that enveloped down was wide and flawless. It was even to the extent that it had attacked him along the way while it was capturing the eye of the last days. Even though it was only in passing and seemed to be done casually and carelessly, a horrifying feeling of danger still arose in Fang Qingshan's heart, and he was extremely horrified. His entire mind was raised to the limit and strained without end. Danger! A great danger had arrived, and it had even surrounded him. It seemed like if he wasn't careful, then this very day next year would be the anniversary of his death. However, at the same time, Fang Qingshan's entire body was trembling. It wasn't from fear, it was from excitement, and his blood seemed as if it was on the verge of boiling. When he was in the eternal world, the God-rank world, the journey to the west, the desolation world, and even when he arrived at boundless space, Fang Qingshan had risen amidst adversity and defeated a stronger opponent. Even though the opponent he faced today might be formidable to the point he was unable to resist. However, whether he could defeat the opponent was one thing, and whether he dared to fight the opponent was another. What was most important to cultivators? Resources, natural talent, karmic luck, fortune, background, cultivation techniques. All of these were important, but there was also willpower and mental state. Cultivating the Tao and cultivating the heart. Only by enduring loneliness, being undaunted by setbacks, facing difficulties head-on without regrets, and not going crazy, one state of mind would one be able to go higher and further. Perhaps in the beginning, natural talent, luck, and background would make one go faster, but in the end, the importance of mental state would be infinitely greater. Without a corresponding mental state, even if one had luck and strength, he wouldn't be able to enjoy them. However, Fang Qingshan's mental state was undoubtedly tenacious. Not to mention his experiences, he was constantly polishing his willpower at every moment. The world was destroyed, but he was not. The sun and the moon were decaying, but he was immortal. Nothing could shake his willpower, not to mention a peak divine emperor, even a venerable emperor. Fight! Now that it had come to this, what else was there to say? Then fight. If someone wanted to kill him, he had to be prepared to be bitten off even if he was killed. Of course, if he could, Fang Qingshan would naturally be willing to stay alive. But this was not up to him, but to the divine emperor who secretly took action. Although Fang Qingshan had the all-heaven chessboard, but in the end, the gap between him and a peak divine emperor was too big. Even if the all-heaven chessboard was unparalleled, it was just like how the second commander had summoned the emperor beheading saber. No matter how mysterious the treasure was, he had to use it first. If he didn't even have time to use it, he would really be helpless. The current situation was that if he wanted to use the all-heaven chessboard, he had to first resist the attack of this divine emperor. Fortunately, although the divine emperor had attacked him, he obviously didn't take him seriously. He had just casually slapped him, as if he was swatting a fly. Even though it was rather embarrassing to talk about it, making one feel indignant and infuriated, that was the truth. Furthermore, this was a good opportunity for Lin Fan. It was precisely because he didn't take it seriously that Fang Qingshan had the chance to escape. Otherwise, if he was deliberately targeted, he would only be dead no matter what. Chapter 1532. Fang Qingshan smiled bitterly. Now that he was looking for a chance of survival, He had to be thankful that the other party did not take him seriously. What a joke. Nonetheless, this was the truth. He could only take advantage of the fact that the other party was collecting the numinous treasures and let his guard down to withstand this wave of attacks in the shortest time possible. He could then use the all-heaven chessboard to open the passage to the Tao chaotic world and escape. Yes, if he wanted to escape, he could only open the passage to the Tao chaotic world. That way, he might have a chance of survival. Otherwise, if he opened the Tao chaotic world or wandered in the void, it would not be any better. After all, even if he had the all-heaven chessboard, he would not be faster than a peak divine emperor tearing through the void. As for wandering in the void, he would not be able to shake off the other party's pursuit. Even if he could, he would not be able to survive if he got lost in the void. Of course, if that did not work, Fang Qingshan would also risk his life. At most, he would blow up the timeless ark, the all-heaven chessboard, the reincarnation mirror, as well as all his treasures and cultivation base. He dared to pull the emperor off his horse even if he was willing to die. He believed that if he really did that, even a peak divine emperor would not be able to survive if he was caught off guard. Although he would suffer heavy losses, it did not mean that he would not be able to survive. That was because he still had a doppelganger, Mosquito Dowren. Yes, there was still Mosquito Dowren. At this moment, Fang Qingshan finally remembered that he had sent Mosquito Dowren to deliver the news. His eyes lit up. Mosquito Dowren, there's really a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. Fang Qingshan originally thought that he would not be able to escape today. He did not expect that he had sent Mosquito Dowren to deliver the news to the sect, but now it had become his life-saving talisman. He was glad that he had sent Mosquito Dowren first. That way, he would not have to worry about the consequences. As long as Mosquito Dowren was still around, he would not be considered to have truly died. Life and death are the most important things in life and death. Since he couldn't die, what was there to be afraid of? So what if he was a peak divine emperor? Wanting to kill him was not something that could be done easily. The only troublesome thing was that if his main body died, the timeless ark and the celestial chessboard would be lost, and he would return to his original state almost overnight. Fortunately, Mosquito Dowren was a primordial beast with outstanding talent. He still had the chance to climb to the peak of the Great Tao. After all, there was nothing that Mosquito Dowren could not swallow, break through without any bottlenecks. Even Fang Qingshan, as the main body, was envious of it. It was enough to ensure that he could trace back to the origin. Of course, if he could avoid death, Fang Qingshan would not want to die. After all, if he were to self-destruct, the loss would be too great, so great that he couldn't bear it, even if he had Mosquito Dowren. Moreover, a bad life was better than a good death. Although Mosquito Dowren was his doppelganger, it was not his real body. Not to mention the fact that the self-destruction of the main body would also hurt the source of the doppelganger. The key was that when the main body was around, there would naturally be no problem, but after the main body died, whether the doppelganger would still be his doppelganger, whether he would still be himself, or whether there would be other changes, Fang Qingshan didn't know. After all, after the doppelganger separated from the main body, it grew a second personality or a new will and intelligence. But whether or not he could escape, Fang Qingshan didn't know. But even if there was only a small chance, he wouldn't let it go. Even if there was no chance, he would create one himself. As for the final result, it was up to God to plan. Anyway, the worst result wouldn't be that bad. Kill! Fang Qingshan shouted. Rumble! Then, he formed a seal, and the killing intent was triggered from his body. Then, the timeless ark and the celestial chessboard merged into one, and then merged with the main body, becoming one with the treasure. Then, the one turned into Sanqing Divine Sense was displayed, followed by the Sanqing Divine Sense. At this moment, Fang Qingshan could be said to have used all his means. Unlike Pang Bo and the others, he didn't have life-saving talismans given by his sect or great ancestor. In fact, even if he did, it would be useless, because he was facing a peak divine emperor, and a life-saving talisman that was useful against a peak divine emperor would have to be refined by a venerable emperor. Rumble. It seemed like a moment, but also like an eternity, the surrounding space exploded again. At this moment, it was even more violent than when Fang Qingshan used all his strength to kill the second commander. However, the pressure that Fang Qingshan had to bear was naturally sharper. Crack! With a sound of ripping silk, Fang Qingshan's skin was torn like a rag, and his whole body was like a fountain of blood. His bones were cracking, and his internal organs and meridians were also full of cracks. Even so, Fang Qingshan's aura was unusually strong. Although it hadn't reached the peak of the Divine Emperor level, it had reached the peak of the late Divine Emperor level. Break! Fang Qingshan blasted out a punch, full of violence, full of killing intent, simple and violent. A dragon's roar shook the heavens and the earth, shaking the starry sky. Time and space were flickering, and the speed was unparalleled. As the punch fell, fate was frozen, and a gentle, eternal aura flowed on the fist. His other hand shook and turned into an ancient, bright saber light, as if the 9 heavens and 10 earths were all contained in this saber. All laws became one, and all laws could be broken. At the same time, the attacks of the 2 hands intertwined. In an instant, it turned into a wheel, black and white alternating. They rotated and restrained each other. In an instant, it was as if all Daos and laws, as well as spiritual wills, were frozen. They lost their perception of up and down, and even their perception of the past and present. It was as if an instant had passed, but it was also as if thousands of years had passed. Time and space were collapsing. Fate was sinking, and the immortal will was collapsing. The power contained in this wheel was too great. In front of this power, there seemed to be no eternal existence in the world. Everything was destined and had to be reincarnated. The wheel rotated, seemingly slow, but was actually fast. It approached from afar, mercilessly killing. Unfortunately, although the large hand seemed to be in front of him, and he seemed to be able to feel the will and power that could kill him at any time, this will seem to have entered the river of time and space. The two seemed very close, but in reality, they were very far away. Moreover, the closer it was to the large hand, the stronger the mighty power became, and the surrounding space became even more frozen. Moreover, the closer it was to the large hand, the stronger the mighty power became, and the surrounding space became even more solidified. The speed of the wheel plummeted. Fortunately, this large hand was not aimed at him. Clang! The roulette struck the large hand horizontally, emitting a loud sound. The large hand remained unmoved, but sparks splashed out like a gorgeous meteor shower. On the contrary, the roulette seemed to have suffered a powerful recoil on the model Dao Si. It staggered back, emitting cracking sounds, and cracked open by the extraordinary recoil force. Even Fang Qingshan himself groaned, and blood flowed from his 7 apertures. His body, which was already unable to bear the burden, seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Chapter 1533. What a peak Divine Emperor! No wonder he's a peak Divine Emperor. Fang Qingshan smiled bitterly. Good heavens! I've become one with the treasure, joined the all-heaven chessboard, performed the one-chi turning Sanqing unification, and my cultivation has soared to the late Divine Emperor realm. But the opponent was just cutting grass to kill a rabbit, and gave me a casual blow. However, even so, the recoil almost killed me. Fortunately, this attack was not without effect. At least it gave Fang Qingshan hope to escape. He was ready to go, and with a thought, he communicated with the all-heaven chessboard and ignited his fate. In a flash, the coordinates of the Tao chaotic world were fixed. Whoosh! The space vibrated, and a passage formed in an instant. Then a snow-white brilliance flew out from the passage. It had eyebrows and eyes, like a living creature, and wrapped around Fang Qingshan. It lifted him up, and it seemed like it was going to move the stars in the next moment. Once Fang Qingshan escaped into the space tunnel, he would reach the Tao chaotic world in an instant. At that time, he would be completely safe. If this mysterious deity emperor dared to chase after him, he wouldn't be the one who killed him. Instead, he would be buried alive. After all, Not everyone could chase after their true disciple under the nose of the Dao sect. Not to mention a divine emperor, the Dao sect would even dare to fight against an emperor. But at this moment, Fang Qingshan didn't feel the slightest bit happy. Because right at this moment, he heard a cold snort and a strand of a terrifying feeling of danger that pressed into the depths of his heart erupted. It caused Fang Qingshan and the ribbon that was dragging him to stop. Then, Fang Qingshan's body stiffened, and the force that dragged him into the space tunnel seemed to have encountered an irresistible force and instantly collapsed. Even the space tunnel opened by the All-Heaven chessboard collapsed in an instant. If it was not for the All-Heaven chessboard's fate burning up, everything would have seemed as if nothing had happened. Although he knew that his chances of escaping were slim, Fang Qingshan still found it hard to accept when the time came. As his first and most important trump card, the All-Heaven chessboard, Fang Qingshan had never thought that one day, even though he had successfully activated it, it would not work at all. Indeed, I am still not strong enough. Fang Qingshan sighed softly. After all, the gap between him and a peak-stage divine emperor was too huge. Even though the celestial chessboard was unparalleled, it was not always successful. Damn it, what do we do now? Do I really have to take that step? At this point, Fang Qingshan was still a little hesitant. It wasn't that he was afraid of death. With Mosquito Darren out there, he was destined not to die. The key was that he had to detonate the timeless arc and the All-Heavens chessboard. That would be a huge loss. Moreover, without the assistance of these supreme treasures, even if Mosquito Darren was extraordinarily talented, it would be several times more difficult for him to reach the peak of the Great Tao. Chun Shi couldn't help but ponder swiftly in his mind as he wanted to see if there was any other way. However, it was obvious that Fang Qingshan was overthinking things. At this point in time, there was no way out at all. If nothing unexpected happened, then he would die as soon as that God Emperor took the Eye of Last Days. Yes, the collision from before hadn't just given Fang Qingshan the opportunity to activate the spatial passageway. It had also given the Eye of Last Days an opportunity to catch its breath. That was why that cold grunt had been so displeasing. It hadn't just almost caused Fang Qingshan to flee, it had almost caused the Eye of Last Days to fly away. It's fate. Looks like I really have no choice but to do this. All of this seemed to have occurred for a very long time, but in reality, only a millionth of an instant had passed. He watched as the Eye of Last Days was being grasped, and then a finger was stabbing towards him. Fang Qingshan had no other choice. Die. Since I can't survive, then let's all die together. At this point in time, besides detonating himself, Fang Qingshan was unable to think of any other way, because this was the best method to deal with the situation right now. Not only would he be able to go for wool and come home shorn, but he would also be able to take revenge in advance. Most importantly, Fang Qingshan wasn't willing to provide support to his enemies. After all, if he didn't detonate these treasures, then his main body would be unable to survive. However, the timeless arc and All-Heaven chessboard would be preserved. Once they fell into the hands of his enemies, then it would be a calamity for him. As the saying goes, those who commit murder and arson are rich, and those who build bridges and pave roads are left with no corpses. Fang Qingshan didn't want the timeless arc and All-Heaven chessboard to fall into the hands of others, especially his enemies. With his cultivation as a peak divine emperor, if he possessed the support of these precious treasures, then it would be impossible for him to become an emperor. On the other hand, after Fang Qingshan lost these precious treasures, he would only have a single clone, Mosquito Darren. Under such circumstances, it would be more than 10 times more difficult for him to take revenge. So, regardless of whether he wanted to drag others down with him or was unwilling to provide support to his enemies, there's only a single path before him right now. Buzz. In an instant, a destructive aura erupted from Fang Qingshan's body. The timeless arc, All-Heaven chessboard, the World Tree clone, the reincarnation mirror, everything became restless. Their origins were in turmoil, as if they were about to explode at any moment. Even the peak divine emperor's expression changed drastically when he sensed this. He never thought that Fang Qingshan would be so decisive. Seeing that there was no way out, he decided to detonate himself, biting off a piece of his flesh before he died. Most importantly, Fang Qingshan's self-detonation not only made him lose the chance to collect his spoils of war, but also posed a great threat to him. After all, Fang Qingshan had reached the late divine emperor level. The self-detonation of a late divine emperor was no small matter to him. Although it might not be fatal, there was a high chance that he would be seriously injured if he wasn't careful. Therefore, at this moment, he couldn't care less and immediately retreated. Qingshan, wait. At this moment, a familiar and hurried voice rang in Fang Qingshan's ears. In an instant, a tyrannical aura swept across like a natural disaster. That aura made everything tremble. From that aura, Fang Qingshan could feel the aura of a peak divine emperor. His heart trembled. His resolute state of mind disappeared instantly. As the saying went, it was better to live than to die. If there was a chance to live, who would be willing to die? Although Fang Qingshan's self-detonation did not mean that he was really dead, the price he had to pay was too heavy. Previously, there was no other way. Now that reinforcements had arrived, Fang Qingshan was naturally unwilling to detonate himself. However, even if he wasn't willing to self-destruct, once he started it, it would be easy to stop it. Although it wasn't a point where there was no turning back, once he started it, it would be easy to stop it. Fortunately, Fang Qingshan had just started and the reinforcements had arrived in time. Otherwise, even if Fang Qingshan was willing, he would have no choice but to detonate himself. Chapter 1534. Self-destruction was a resolute thing to do. It was difficult to turn back after a shot was fired. Just think about the backlash from being interrupted while activating a divine ability. How could there be no side effects from suddenly stopping self-destruction? Therefore, even though Fang Qingshan had stopped in time, he still suffered an unprecedented backlash. Fortunately, compared to self-detonation, this was clearly much better. Although he was heavily injured, as long as he recuperated properly, he would eventually recover. If he self-detonated, there would really be no turning back, and it would be the end of everything. Bang! A blood-red firework exploded. It was very dazzling, but compared to the Dragon Emperor's self-destruction, it was far inferior in terms of power, scale, and other aspects. It was like firing a cannon that had misfired. Those who didn't know better might even think that they had encountered a fake. The reason for this was naturally because this wasn't a phenomenon caused by Fang Qingshan's self-destruction. Instead, it was because he had suffered a backlash. His body couldn't bear the burden and directly collapsed. Fang Qingshan had first killed the Battle Dragon Emperor, then killed the 3 great commanders, then collected the Eye of the Last Days. Then, he was attacked by a peak divine emperor. He was already an arrow at the end of its flight. At this moment, when he forcefully withdrew his consciousness from self-destruction, he finally couldn't hold on any longer. His body directly exploded and transformed into a rain of blood that filled the sky. Fortunately, even though his body exploded into a mist of blood, it quickly gathered and transformed into a body once again. It was like a mist that gathered and dispersed into form. In the end, Fang Qingshan's innate divine ability contained the profoundness of rebirth from a single drop of blood. However, even though the innate divine ability was profound, the damage he had suffered was too great. Even though he relied on the innate divine ability to gather and reform his body, it disintegrated after a short while. He was like a plate of loose sand without any cohesion. It wasn't just his body. Even though his soul didn't explode, it wasn't in a good state either. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was riddled with holes. The reincarnation mirror almost shattered, and the heavenly pillar of laws was also densely covered in all kinds of hideous cracks. The timeless ark had also suffered unprecedented damage this time. The entire timeless ark was like a piece of porcelain that was about to shatter. It was densely covered in fine cracks, and it seemed as if it could be crushed with just a little bit of force. It was in a dangerous situation that was on the verge of breaking. If Fang Qingshan had not integrated the Timeless Ark's level 3 spiritual root, the Lotus of Bliss, the Timeless Ark would have been in danger of disintegrating. Once that happened, the losses would be huge. Although the Timeless Ark's grade wouldn't drop, its foundation would be shaken. Even if it was repaired, its power would be greatly reduced, and it would be no different from an ordinary Timeless Ark. Moreover, repairing it was also a troublesome matter. The Timeless Ark could rely on its self-healing ability to repair itself, although it would take a long time. However, if it was completely shattered, it would be impossible to repair it by oneself, but the difficulty could be foreseen. Pulling one's hair would affect the whole body. If the Timeless Ark's foundation was damaged, it would affect the quality of the eternal blessing, and the quality of the eternal blessing would affect the improvement of one's cultivation and understanding of the realm. It would be difficult for the original body to improve its cultivation, so it would not be able to get more and better resources, and there would not be more and better resources to improve the Timeless Ark. In this way, the cycle would start again, forming a vicious cycle. Fortunately, it didn't really shatter. Fortunately, the elder came in time. Fang Qingshan felt a burst of joy in his heart. Although he was a little puzzled as to why Zhuge Jin came so quickly, now is not the time to think about this. The explosion did not succeed. Although the original body and various treasures were damaged, it was still within the range of what he could bear. As long as he recuperated for a period of time, and with a small price to pay, with the Timeless Ark's self-healing ability, after a period of time, he could use his own strength to repair the crack bit by bit. The damage would heal on its own. However, this required time. If he did not use other resources, this period might be very long. During this time, he could not easily use the Timeless Ark, the numinous treasure, or the original body. Otherwise, if he was not careful, he would be injured on top of his previous injuries. If that happened, it would be really difficult to turn back, and it would be too late to cry. Blessings and misfortunes depended on each other, and misfortunes lurked within the blessing. As long as he could get through this, it might not be a bad thing for Fang Qingshan. As the saying goes, without destruction, there can be no construction. Although this kind of damage was not something he wanted to see, if he could turn the situation from passive to active and from disadvantageous to advantageous, it might not be a bad thing. Between life and death, there was naturally a great horror. If he cultivated normally, he would definitely be able to do it step by step. Even if he wanted to go deeper, he would definitely not be able to do it to this extent. But now, although it was damaged so badly, he could go deeper to temper and repair it. A bad thing might not necessarily be unable to become a good thing. The All-Heaven chessboard did not suffer too much damage, but the luck on it was used up. This made Fang Qingshan very uneasy. After all, if his luck was low, even drinking cold water would be stuffy. Especially now that he could be blown away by the wind, he could not afford to be tossed around. Return to the Dao sect. Before my injuries are completely healed, I will not come out until my luck has recovered to a certain level. Fang Qingshan secretly decided. His injuries could not be delayed. Since the reinforcements had arrived, Fang Qingshan breathed a sigh of relief and began to heal his injuries. All kinds of healing medicines were poured into his mouth as if they were free. The eternal divine marrow seeped out of his spine bit by bit. The power of the source of wood of the world tree avatar and the lightning-gathering pagoda operated wildly, and the power of eternity splashed out. Sure enough, it was the same as what Fang Qingshan had thought. Although this time the damage was great, it could allow his magic power, primordial spirit, laws, and so on to circulate deeper. If he could only temper to the atom before, he could now temper to the nucleus. All kinds of power seeped in from the numerous cracks that were riddled with holes, bit by bit, repairing, tempering, fusing, and strengthening. It really works. Feeling the changes in his body, Fang Qingshan secretly felt a flash of joy. Phew! When Fang Qingshan sensed Zhuge Jin's arrival, he heaved a sigh of relief, but he almost scared Zhuge Jin. Yes, the person who came was from the Dao sect, and it was the Dao sect's elder, Zhuge Jin. Seeing Fong Qingshan explode into a cloud of blood rain, Zhuge Jin was on the verge of breathing. He thought that Fong Qingshan had not been able to stop him and had really self-destructed. If that was the case, then this trip would have been in vain, and the Dao sect would have suffered a great loss. One must know that Fong Qingshan could be said to be a seeded player of the Dao sect, and he was a little trump card. Not to mention his talent, just the existence of the timeless arc would have a great effect on the entire Dao sect. If he died, not only would it be a great loss to Fong Qingshan, but it would also be a great loss to the Dao sect. Fortunately, he soon realized that Fong Qingshan wasn't going to self-destruct. Only then did he relax. Chapter 1535. Ever since Elder Ming Deng informed them that someone had killed the potential disciples and seed disciples of the sect, everyone from the Dao sect was burning with rage and anxiety. Therefore, they immediately set out to rescue them as soon as they heard the news. They were afraid that if they were late, the tragedy would have already happened. Even if they managed to get their revenge, the damage had already been done. Especially for the safety of Peng Bo, Fong Qingshan, Jiang Shan, and Zheng Xian, Zhuge Jin and the others. Zhuge Jin and the others had always been worried. They prayed in their hearts as they rushed to the Fallen Dragon's secret realm. That was why Zhuge Jin could appear in the Fallen Dragon's secret realm so quickly. Finally, the hard work paid off, or rather, the luck of the Dao sect him, and Fong Qingshan was pretty good. After ensuring Fong Qingshan's safety, Zhuge Jin saw that he looked like he could be killed with a single breath. In an instant, rage exploded in Zhuge Jin's mind. How dare you attack the disciples of the Dao sect? Even if you die 100 times, it would not be enough. It was so close, so close. If he had been a step slower, it would have been too late. As the extremely tyrannical aura swept over, a cold and silent voice was heard. It was filled with an astonishing and violent power. In an instant, the sound was like rolling thunder. It seemed to come from a distant place, but it seemed to have exploded directly in the depths of everyone's hearts. As a result, the deity emperor who was about to kill Fong Qingshan turned pale. Fortunately, Zhuge Jin knew that Fong Qingshan could no longer withstand the slightest disturbance, so he deliberately controlled it. Otherwise, Fong Qingshan would not have died in the hands of others, but would have been accidentally injured and killed by Zhuge Jin's soundwave attack. That would have been really interesting. Come to think of it, the peak divine emperor who wanted to kill Fong Qingshan heard the voice and felt the aura. His expression changed drastically, looking even worse than when he faced Fong Qingshan's self-explosion. This was because he already knew who it was. And because he knew who it was, he was even more terrified. Yes, terrified. Although Zhuge Jin was a peak divine emperor, he was also a peak divine emperor. However, even though they were all peak divine emperors, the gap between them was like heaven and earth. This could actually be seen from the trump cards of the three great commanders. Standing behind the commander was the god emperor of three treasures. He was a figure who was even more powerful than the Dao sect's elder of many treasures, Qian Duo Duo, and the elder of technique impartation, Zhuge Jin. The sword Qi of the supreme treasure could injure a peak deity emperor, while the 8-gem Ru E umbrella could defend against a peak deity emperor's attack. He did not know who was behind the second commander, but he could directly summon the level 4 treasure, the Emperor Beheading Saber. It could even kill a peak divine emperor if it was caught off guard. Only the third commander had 2 talismans, but he could only trap late-stage deity emperors. Although it was impossible to determine his specific combat power from the talisman, he refined. Just like the talisman in Kong Chang's hand, it could only defend against early divine emperors, but it was still refined by a peak divine emperor. After all, there was still a gap between them. Hence, when he saw that it was Zhuge Jin, his expression changed drastically. There were 2 reasons. Firstly, because of the Dao sect's large-scale operation, the forces behind them had already been cleaned up. They did not want others to find out who it was. But now, they might not be able to do so. Once they fought, they would definitely be exposed. Once they were exposed, the problem would be troublesome. Moreover, he did not know that he had already been exposed. At least, Fang Qingshan knew that the Martial Pinnacle sect and the Freedom sect were among those who participated this time. If he knew, he would probably not have this worry. Secondly, because of his cultivation base, he could not match up to Zhuge Jin. If he fell behind, he would be beaten up. Moreover, when he was trying to kill Fang Qingshan, he was almost forced to self-destruct and was caught red-handed by Zhuge Jin. Of course, the most important thing was that his cultivation base was not as good as Zhuge Jin's. If he could defeat Zhuge Jin, everything would not be a problem. One more person was just one more target to kill. What should I do now? The peak Divine Emperor in the dark was thinking frantically. The best way was naturally to turn around and leave before Zhuge Jin completely arrived. This way, not only would it be safer, but it could also reduce the risk of being exposed. It could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. However, he could not bear to give up such a great opportunity to kill Fang Qingshan. To be honest, although he had already known about Fang Qingshan's existence from the intelligence and had a certain understanding of his talent, it was better to meet him in person. But hearing about him was not as good as meeting him in person. When he really saw Fang Qingshan, he was even more shocked by his talent. He was not a divine emperor, but only at the peak of the immortal realm. It was really shocking that he could actually cross almost an entire realm in terms of combat power. Such an existence was probably rare even among the top 30 supreme forces, such as the Saint Buddha clan, the primordial immortal clan, and the heavenly evil clan. Once such an existence grew up, it could be said to be a disaster for other forces that were close to the Tao Will sect or hostile to the Tao Will sect. Most importantly, he had now attacked Fang Qingshan. As the saying went, if you don't kill a snake, you will be harmed instead. He could already imagine that if he did not kill young Master Qingshui this time, he would definitely fall in the hands of Fang Qingshan in the future. Therefore, whether it was for the sect or for himself, he had a reason to attack Fang Qingshan. He was in a dilemma. If he ran away, he would have a great chance of ensuring his current safety. If he did not run away, or if he killed Fang Qingshan first, he could ensure his future safety. It was really a difficult choice. Although thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind, they were not even a millionth of a second, or even a millionth of a second. Humph, I will let you go today. The mysterious peak Divine Emperor finally decided to run away. As the saying went, where there is life, there is hope. He felt that if he let Fang Qingshan go, he would definitely fall in his hands in the future. But this was just a feeling, just a possibility in the future. The past did not change, and there were countless possibilities in the future. If he had other opportunities in the future, if he broke through to the Emperor Venerable realm, then the threat from Fang Qingshan would not be a threat. On the contrary, if he insisted on killing Fang Qingshan, although it was very simple, he only needed to stretch out his hand and blow a breath, and it would be the straw that broke the camel's back. But it also took time to stretch out his hand and blow. Even if it was only for a short period of time, it was a fatal danger to him. Although Zhuge Jin seemed to be very far away, this distance could be the time for him to attack. Therefore, for the sake of his own safety, in the next breath, his body began to twist in an eerie manner. Then, the space-time fluctuated, and a space tunnel similar to the one Fang Qingshan had opened using the all-heaven chessboard was formed at lightning speed. Chapter 1536. Sigh, what a pity. At this moment, he still felt a little regretful that he couldn't kill Fang Qingshan. After all, if they missed today, not to mention Fang Qingshan himself, even the Tao Will sect wouldn't give them the chance to eliminate them in the future. Once bitten, twice shy. This time, it was only because the Tao Will sect had touched the nerves of too many people and they had caught the Tao Will sect off guard. However, being able to obtain the Eye of the Last Days can already be considered to be worth this trip. As he gazed at the Eye of the Last Days in his hand, he started laughing again. Lose in the east, gain in the mulberry. With this treasure, his overall strength would increase by more than one level. As the saying goes, pull one hair and the whole body will move. It was a chain reaction. With the Eye of the Last Days, his strength and combat strength would improve, and he would be able to strive for even better resources. At the same time, it would be easier for him to improve his cultivation. If he were to encounter such a situation in the future, he wouldn't be the one retreating. Unfortunately, his thinking was very naive. Just as a trace of regret and longing appeared on his face, in an instant, no, in a billionth of an instant, this person would be able to escape from this place. At this time, Zhuge Jin had yet to arrive. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Unfortunately, even though Zhuge Jin had yet to arrive, his power had already spread through the air. You want to leave? What wishful thinking. You think you can just leave after bullying a disciple of my Dao Will sect? Where would my Dao Will sect's face be if I don't kill you today? Zhuge Jin roared. His voice rumbled like thunder, causing the space around the entire fallen dragon's secret realm to tremble. If the Dragon Emperor, the Great Commander, and the others were still alive, this roar alone would be enough to seriously injure them. It would have been fine if he hadn't encountered the culprit, but now that he had, he could only watch as Fang Qingshan nearly blew himself up in front of him. If he couldn't take down the culprit, how was he going to explain to Fang Qingshan and the sect? Today, it was Fang Qingshan. Tomorrow, it would be Pang Bo. Would it be them the day after tomorrow? Kill the chicken to warn the monkey. The Dao Will sect was just too kind. Although many people were willing to receive the Dao Will sect's promise and goodwill, the Dao Will sect didn't dare to do so. However, it was also because of this that a kind person would be bullied and a kind horse would be ridden. Otherwise, how could he have been attacked by so many people? Being kind to others could certainly form good karma, but at the same time, it could also make others feel weak. However, this did not mean that the Dao Will sect had no edge. However, because the old ancestor had fallen, the Dao Will sect did not have enough confidence, so they chose to lay low. But now it seemed that staying dormant meant compromising to the others. This meant that he could use underhanded methods. As long as there was no concrete evidence, he could do whatever he wanted. As one of the higher-ups of the Dao Will sect, how could Zhuge Jin not be angry when faced with such a situation? How could he not want to fight back? If he wanted to retaliate, he obviously needed concrete evidence. As the saying goes, to catch an adulterous couple, to catch a thief, to catch the stolen goods. If it was the heavenly evil race or the Saint Buddha race, there wouldn't be a need to do this. As long as there was a suspect, it would be fine. They would rather kill 1,000 people than let a single person go. In the end, it was still a matter of strength. If they were not strong enough, they could only rely on a good reason. Just like the Emperor God, he didn't know that Fang Qingshan already knew who the mastermind was, and he even had concrete evidence. Yes, Fang Qingshan had concrete evidence in his hands. Forget about the third commander and the first commander, because they had already used their trump cards. Even if he said it, it could only be used as a reference and not as evidence in court. However, the second commander's 8-gem Ru-E umbrella was obtained by Fang Qingshan with a treasure fall coin. This was the Dharma treasure of the Emperor God of 3-gem. With this treasure, even if he didn't want to admit it, he couldn't do anything. Who would believe him? Speaking of which, Zhuge Jin waved his arm, and his 5 fingers were like curved blades. His fingertips were snow white, and cold light burst forth. With a strong grip, an invisible force crossed the boundaries of time and space. The Peak Emperor God let out a cry. The next moment, the Emperor God, who was trying to escape by opening a space tunnel and jumping through space, suddenly felt an unprecedented pressure. Although he wasn't frozen in mid-air like Fang Qingshan, he obviously didn't have the strength to continue escaping, and his escape light was instantly broken. Bang! After that, there seemed to be an extremely powerful and invisible force pressing down on him, and then a bang resounded as the tunnel that had just been opened instantly exploded. The space he was in collapsed completely. Chaotic chi poured down like a waterfall, and it pierced into the depths of space like a divine awe. It was to the extent that he was greatly affected by the explosion. Not only had his escape path been destroyed, even his body and soul core had been impacted by this extremely terrifying force, and he'd suffered slight injuries. Fortunately, Zhuge Jin hadn't targeted him, and she'd targeted the spatial tunnel instead. She didn't want him to escape. Damn it! The Emperor cursed in his heart. At this moment, he'd slightly experienced the despair that Fangqing Shan had felt just now. It was truly a feeling of being cornered, and he couldn't even escape. If he knew this would happen, he should have left immediately after he obtained the last day's eye. In that way, he wouldn't have caused any problems. Once he digested the last day's eye, he wouldn't be afraid at all even if he faced Zhuge Jin. After all, he'd witnessed the might of the last day's eye with his own 2 eyes. With this treasure in his possession, not to mention fighting against Zhuge Jin, it might even be possible for him to kill Zhuge Jin and defeat her. Yet now, he was in a precarious situation. Even though he felt regretful and anxious in his heart, his actions weren't slow at all. He took out a bead with a pained expression. This pearl was inscribed with ancient talisman markings, and they formed a profound trajectory that was deep and profound. It clearly flickered with a strange glow. As he held it in his hand, it seemed like an entire teleportation formation. The wormhole pearl. Yes, this pearl was called the wormhole pearl. As its name implied, it was actually a precious treasure that had been refined from a wormhole. There were 3 treasures that could be used to travel through space. The first was a teleportation formation. However, it usually didn't travel very far, and it consumed a huge amount of energy. The second was a flying ship. It was the most common, but it was very slow. Moreover, it was very dangerous to fly through space. The safest and fastest method was a wormhole. However, wormholes weren't common. Moreover, the places they appeared weren't fixed. Thus, the wormhole pearls had appeared. Once wormholes that appeared in remote places and didn't have much value appeared and were discovered, they would be taken away by others with great techniques and refined into wormhole pearls. Even though they become one-time use treasures, they were superb treasures that could save one's life. When one encountered danger, one could directly crush it like a one-time use talisman. After that, one could form a stable wormhole. Not only was it fast, it wasn't easy to break through as well. It could be said to be a must-have treasure for traveling. Chapter 1537. The preciousness of wormholes was common knowledge. Not only was it safe, it was swift, and it didn't suffer any losses. It was even more precious. After all, even though transforming a fixed wormhole into a one-time use pearl seemed like a waste of God's given gifts, it was absolutely useful when used to save one's life. Generally speaking, escape techniques, streaks, and spirit treasures could be easily disrupted while they were being utilized. However, wormholes didn't have such worries. Besides special techniques, one could basically escape once they were utilized. So, the value of wormhole pearls had always been high, and they were priceless. Even though he'd obtained the last day's eye this time, it still hurt to use up a wormhole pearl. However, for the sake of safety and for the sake of not exposing himself, he could only brace himself and use it. He squeezed forcefully. Suddenly, a clear and hazy vortex appeared, and the sound of spatial waves could be heard. It was like looking at a flower through mist, hazy and mysterious. In an instant, a wormhole was formed, and then a torrent shot out and swept towards the God Emperor. It instantly intended to drag him into the vortex. A wormhole pearl? Zhuge Jin was slightly surprised, and a strange voice resounded. I never expected that you would actually possess such a treasure. Unfortunately, you can dream of leaving today even if you possess a wormhole pearl. He was surprised because even he didn't possess a treasure like the wormhole pearl, and its value wasn't inferior to some high-grade rank 3 supreme treasures at all. As for the reason, it was because even though this treasure was great, it had fallen into his hands. It could only be said that one was extremely unlucky. Generally speaking, possessing a wormhole pearl was sufficient to deal with most dangers of life and death. It was exactly because of this that the wormhole pearl was so famous, precious, and rare. Unfortunately, it was his fault for utilizing the wormhole pearl in front of Zhuge Jin. It was very obvious that even if he utilized a life-saving technique like the wormhole pearl, he was still unable to escape Zhuge Jin's pursuit. Actually, he could be considered to be unlucky. The wormhole pearl was precious indeed, and it was a good life-saving technique. If it was anyone else, then perhaps he would have been able to escape. However, he'd encountered Zhugajin. Zhugajin possessed a precious treasure called the space-time nail. Although this item was named space-time, it didn't have any space-time methods. It wasn't like the chaos bead or the chaos bell. Its offensive power wasn't strong, and it didn't have much defensive power. However, it had one effect. It was exceptionally useful at specific times. It could freeze everything related to time and space. He could use it to stabilize the space tunnel, and he could also use it to stop the transfer of time and space. Just like a sword, whether it was used to kill or save someone depended on how it was used. At this moment, to Zhugajin, of course, it was used to stop the space-time transfer, to prevent the enemy from escaping. He let out a shout, and a light flashed in his hand. Suddenly, a finger-sized silver-white nail that seemed to have space-time fragments flying around it flew out. In the blink of an eye, it grew with the wind and transformed into a height of over 30 kilometers. It seemed to contain some sort of unique aura of the Tao. It was not space-time, but the profound meaning of the fixed body technique. In an instant, it was as if the wormhole in space-time had become sluggish in front of the space-time nail. It was as if they had encountered their natural enemy and immediately began to tremble violently. Although this space-time nail looked like there was only one, it was a set similar to the kind of mother-child sword. It could be divided into a total of 81 nails, and each nail had the ability to nail a space-time tunnel. With a set, it could even be set up into a set of formations. 9 by 9 became 1, and its power was unparalleled. It was rumored that back then, someone had refined a set of pinnacle level 4 space-time nails in an attempt to freeze the river of time and space and go against the flow. Although it failed in the end, the power of the space-time nail was evident. This space-time nail was a treasure nurtured by the heavens and the earth. Subsequently, it was refined by Zhugajin with various space-time attributes and fixed-body techniques. Its grade was no weaker than the 8-gem Ru-E umbrella, and it was extremely powerful. Against cultivators and other spiritual treasures, it might not be able to cause fatal damage, but it had a unique and miraculous effect against the space-time tunnel. This was a treasure that was born to deal with space-time. Freeze! Zhugajin shouted lightly, and the space-time nail in his hand instantly transformed into 81 nails. After that, they moved according to a certain profound trajectory, and a wave of clanging resounded as they instantly entered the wormhole. In an instant, the entire wormhole suddenly let out a sorrowful cry, and then the originally stable wormhole started to tremble violently. A strand of invisible devouring energy could be seen to be emanating from the space-time nail, and then the space-time energy within the entire wormhole was being devoured. In just a short period of time, the entire wormhole had collapsed completely. Damn it, the space-time nail? At this moment, the God Emperor had witnessed all of this, and he was simply furious to the point of almost splitting apart. His face seemed like it was covered in ashes, and it was gloomy to the point it seemed like it could drip water at any moment. He seemed extremely unsightly. It was already painful for him to utilize a treasure like the wormhole pearl, and most importantly, it didn't have any effect even after he utilized it. So, it was even more painful for him. He really didn't look at the almanac before he left the house. Not only had he encountered Zhugajin, he actually just happened to possess a treasure like the space-time nail. However, he'd forgotten that he'd almost annihilated Fong Qingshan after taking the last day's eye. He just couldn't help but feel pain for his wormhole pearl. All those years ago, he'd expended a huge amount of effort to obtain this treasure, and he was lucky that he hadn't gone bankrupt. He'd originally intended to keep it as a life-saving trump card, yet he'd never expected that it would be wasted before it could even reveal its effects. For a time, his expression carried an icy cold and resolute expression. Since he couldn't escape, then he would fight. Even though he knew that he wasn't a match for Zhugajin, he would only know the exact truth after he fought Zhugajin. Moreover, he might have a chance. When he thought up to here, a gaze that was filled with malice shot over. The gaze that was completely indifferent to the outside world, and was wholeheartedly focused on repairing Fang Qingshan's body. Yes, since he couldn't escape, then there was only one method left. Capture Fang Qingshan. It wasn't that he wanted to continue killing Fang Qingshan as he'd done before, and he wanted to drag Fang Qingshan down with him, even if he died. It was because he wanted to take Fang Qingshan hostage so that Zhuge Jin would refrain from attacking Fang Qingshan and accomplish his objective of escaping. Unfortunately, it was too late. If he'd made a move decisively upon noticing Zhuge Jin's arrival, then he would probably have a trace of hope. But now, Zhuge Jin's figure had already appeared on the battlefield. Whem! The sky suddenly opened up, and clear, watery light descended from above. It emanated boundless radiance, and a myriad of golden lanterns and necklaces hung down and tinkled. For a time, the blue sky seemed to have been washed, and violet energy suffused the sky while auspicious light descended to the ground. Flowing lights formed auspicious colors, and a myriad of lanterns illuminated the surroundings. The originally monotonous and obscure boundless space had instantly become bright and beautiful. Chapter 1538. When the saints set out, the purple aura came from the east, not to mention an existence like Zhuge Jin. Even before he appeared, the entire void seemed to have changed into a new look. This was not him deliberately showing off, but because the release of the power formed an organic resonance with the laws of heaven and earth, and the heavens and earth were illuminated. Just like in the desolation, when Sanqing, Niuhua, and the others became saints, flowers fell from the sky and golden lotuses appeared on the ground. It was a celebration of heaven and earth. Then, Zhuge Jin walked out from the gap in the void, holding a horsetail whisk in his hand. He seemed to be moving slowly, but was actually moving quickly. The beautiful embroidery floating around him was the will of the way intertwined with various colors. Bits and pieces of seal script flowed, as vast as the starry sky, bottomless. After Zhuge Jin entered the battlefield, he was not in a hurry to deal with the peak divine emperor who made him want to skin and tear off his bones. Instead, his eyes fell on Fang Qingshan, who was his main goal. If something were to happen to Fang Qingshan, even if he were to take revenge, it would be completely useless. With Zhuge Jin's vision, under the illumination of the Heart of Light, everything was naturally clear to him. As long as it was not deliberately hidden or under special circumstances, generally speaking, nothing could hide from him. At the moment, it was impossible for Fang Qingshan to do so. He did not have the ability to do so, and there was no need for him to hide. Then he clearly felt the aura of decay on Fang Qingshan's body and that seriously injured and dying look. Once again, his anger rose. Back then, during the inner disciple grand competition, Fang Qingshan was so high-spirited. But now he was so dispirited that one could not even tell that he was human anymore. From this, one could tell how much suffering he had gone through. Qingshan, rest in peace. Don't worry about your injuries. I will take you back to the sect in a while, and I will definitely help you recover as soon as possible. As for the hardships you encountered before, I will return them to them one by one. Now, watch me take revenge for you. Zhuge Jin first comforted Fang Qingshan. After all, although it seemed that he was not dead, his injuries were too serious. For cultivators, death did not seem to be that scary. Instead, it was becoming a cripple, or, in other words, not being able to reach the great path that was even more difficult to accept. Therefore, he first comforted Fang Qingshan that his injuries were minor and could be healed. Then, they said that they would avenge him. As he spoke, he waved his sleeves, and clouds filled the sky. At the very top was limitless true water, which surged endlessly in all directions. Within the true water, a brace-sized seal character appeared. It curled upwards and turned into a black tortoise. It shook its head and wagged its tail. Below it was a cover that was dark blue in color. There were faint sounds of surging waves. The black tortoise coiled in the dark blue cover, its roar shaking the heavens. Tortoise-shell shields floated around it, forming an impenetrable defense. Black tortoise true water shield. This was one of Zhuge Jin's defensive treasures. It was only slightly inferior to Sanbao Shenhuang's 8 treasures Rui umbrella. Most importantly, the 8 treasures wishful umbrella focused on defense, while the black tortoise true water barrier was both offensive and defensive. With both offensive and defensive capabilities and multitasking, it was naturally impossible to focus purely on defense. However, with the protection of this treasure on Fang Qingshan, no one below the peak divine emperor cultivation could break through his defense. In this way, Zhuge Jin could do whatever she wanted to and help Fang Qingshan and the Dao will sect vent their anger. Otherwise, she would have to restrain herself when she made move later. She was afraid that Fang Qingshan would be affected by the aftermath. At this moment, what was that peak divine emperor doing? He couldn't beat him. Although they hadn't fought yet, he knew his own limits. Otherwise, he wouldn't have run away in advance when he sensed Zhuge Jin's arrival. Unfortunately, he couldn't escape. Fortunately, there was still a chance, because he wasn't fighting alone. Yes, he had already seen his helpers. Outside the battlefield, just after Zhuge Jin arrived, another person arrived. This was really a place of trouble. Everyone came one after another and made their appearance. First, it was the commander and his entourage, then it was Fang Qingshan, then the third commander, then the peak divine emperor, and finally Zhuge Jin. Although this last person couldn't be compared to the peak divine emperor and Zhuge Jin, he was still a late divine emperor expert. This person was in the same group as the 3 commanders and the peak divine emperor. His name was Duan Wei, and he was specially sent to deal with Fang Qingshan. Previously, because the Dao sect made a big move, almost all of them came out. No one was prepared for a full-scale war. Moreover, they each had their own ulterior motives and were afraid that others would harm them. Moreover, this time, although the time was short and the Dao sect reacted quickly, the harvest was not small. Disciples of all sizes, outer sanctum, inner sanctum, and true disciples were more or less killed by them. Moreover, there were also some true geniuses among them. Half of their goal was achieved. Although it wasn't perfect, the result was already gratifying. Therefore, everyone sent messages to the frontline soldiers to immediately stop and cut off all traces. The only thing that they were not satisfied with was that there was no news from Fang Qingshan and Peng Bo. Obviously, the operation against the 2 of them was not successful. This was a big failure. To them, as long as they could kill Fang Qingshan, Peng Bo, or one of them, even if there was no harvest in other places, it would be a happy ending. Unfortunately, the result was not satisfactory. However, it was also because of this that they were even more determined to kill Fang Qingshan and Peng Bo. The reason for this was naturally because according to the people they had sent to deal with Fang Qingshan and Peng Bo, it was enough. However, the result was not good. There were only 2 possibilities. One was that the strength of Fang Qingshan and Peng Bo was far beyond the information they had collected. The other was that they had good luck, turning misfortunes into blessings and adversity into auspiciousness. But no matter which one it was not good news for them. They bitterly regretted that they had been working hard every year for others. If they did not succeed this time, not only would they suffer losses, but they would also help Fang Qingshan and Peng Bo. For geniuses like Fang Qingshan and Peng Bo, the calamity was not scary, and there was nothing to fear. This was because it was equivalent to a different kind of cultivation. As long as they could get through it safely, their strength, foundation, and all other aspects would usher in a leap. They were already beyond the scope of their control. If they accelerated their growth and became better, wouldn't they be even more difficult to deal with? Moreover, they were using themselves to measure others. It was fine if they did not have the ability and opportunity to target others, but if they did, wouldn't they take revenge? As for whether they knew who was behind the scenes, paper could not wrap fire. Even if they did not know now, they would find out one day. Moreover, they did not need solid evidence to take revenge, nor did they need to testify in court, nor did they need to worry about anything. As the saying went, it was only right and proper to pay back debts. This was a justifiable thing to do. Chapter 1539. In fact, this was not a big deal. Even if they really fought with each other face to face, this was still not a big deal. After all, no matter how powerful Fang Qingshan was, he was just one person. Even if he became a venerable sovereign, he was not a big deal. What they were afraid of was that it was easy to dodge a spear in the open, but difficult to guard against an arrow in the dark. Just by targeting one or two people in the dark, like a venomous snake, hiding in the dark and ready to deal a fatal blow at any time. Not to mention anything else, just that terrifying atmosphere alone was enough to make them feel as if there was a thorn in their backs and a fishbone stuck in their throats. As for why they were not afraid of the Tao, well, sect. This was the difference between an individual and a force. There were different things to worry about. In any case, it was just a personal matter. There wasn't much involvement. However, a sect was different. It was a collective entity with too many interests involved. Putting all this aside, Duan Wei was sent out to rush to the place where the first commander and the others died. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late. In the end, they were one step behind in receiving the news. In addition, their cultivation was not as high as Zhuge Jin's, so they naturally arrived later. Feeling the qi of a peak divine emperor, Zhuge Jin, Duan Wei was shocked. Although he was a late divine emperor, he was just an ordinary late divine emperor, not to mention facing two peak divine emperors. Although one of them was familiar to him, he didn't care because he had already been shocked by Zhuge Jin's anger and pressure. Even if it was an elite late divine emperor, he would have to retreat, let alone the current situation. Not to mention him, didn't that peak divine emperor also run away as soon as he saw Zhuge Jin? Looks like I'm late. What a pity. Duan Wei shook his head. Although he had failed the mission, it was not his fault. After all, not to mention him, even if someone else was in his place, they would not be able to change the outcome. He only felt a little regretful. After all, the reward of the mission was very attractive. However, although the reward was good, he had to be alive to enjoy it. Facing a peak divine emperor, he did not have the slightest bit of intention. He originally wanted to turn around and leave. This was indeed a wise move. Unfortunately, he wanted to leave, but it was already beyond his control. Before he could turn around and leave, he heard the familiar voice of the divine emperor. Duan Wei, quick, sent a message to Sanbao and the others for reinforcements. The reason why he had asked Duan Wei to send the message instead of doing it himself was because he had asked Duan Wei to do it. There were two reasons. The first reason was because in a battle between experts, victory or defeat was decided in a matter of seconds. At this moment, Zhuge Jin had already locked onto him, and the slightest movement would result in a thunderous strike. He was originally inferior to Zhuge Jin, and if he were to be distracted, he would be courting death. Furthermore, he knew that Duan Wei was specially sent to deal with Fang Qingshan. Due to the failure of the first commander and the others, as well as the current situation, Duan Wei had a special communication treasure with him, which allowed him to inform and direct the operation faster. Two flowers blossomed, one on each side. Everything seemed to have happened a long time ago, but from the moment Zhuge Jin threw out the space-time nail to the moment she used secret voice sending to call for reinforcements, it was actually only a fraction of a second. Shua! Zhuge Jin shifted her gaze from Fang Qingshan to the emperor. In an instant, the peak divine emperor sensed a kind of calmness from Zhuge Jin, a kind of eternal and immortal aura, even if the starry sky collapsed and the universe was destroyed. However, it was this tranquility that was even more frightening. Either die in silence or explode in silence. This was the calm before the storm. However calm it was now, it would be as turbulent when it exploded. The little bit of fighting spirit that had just risen in the emperor's heart instantly crumbled, and his heart was beating like a drum. Death! It was so sudden and so shocking. He really felt an aura of death envelop him. His eyes widened, and he was extremely shocked. He felt a wave of power from Zhuge Jin's body, and it made him unconsciously feel terrified. It was as if he was about to be destroyed, and he trembled extremely. Wait a moment. I'm Chang Luxue, a member of the Thousand Autumns sect. Elder Zhuge, I think this is a misunderstanding. He wanted to struggle a little, Or perhaps it was because the pressure Zhuge Jin gave him was too great and he couldn't run. So he just admitted defeat. The Thousand Autumn Sect? How dare a mere member of the Thousand Autumn Sect attack a true disciple of the Tao will sect? Good job. Misunderstanding? Ha! Zhuge Jin chuckled, but it was a fake smile, which made people feel scared. It's true. We're just fighting over this treasure. As he spoke, he waved the Eye of the Last Days in his hand. I was blinded by greed. I'm willing to compensate you. Please forgive me for the sake of the Eternal Heaven Sect. He had 3 meanings when he said that. First, he wanted to use the name of a tiger to scare Zhuge Jin. Yes, the Eternal Heaven Sect was behind this force. The Eternal Heaven Sect was known as the Eternal Spring and Autumn Sect. The sect's inheritance was orderly, and it wasn't inferior to the Tao sect. In fact, it was even more superior than the Tao sect now. Because even when the Tao sect was at its peak, they might not be inferior. Even so, this time, the Eternal Heaven Sect was also involved. They wanted to eliminate the danger while it was still in the cradle, but they didn't directly attack. The force behind the Emperor, the Thousand Autumn Sect, was equivalent to a force that was attached to the Eternal Heaven Sect. The Eternal Heaven Sect was the Eternal Heaven Sect. Second, they wanted to make it clear that the reason they attacked this time was to fight over the treasure and not to kill Fang Qingshan. This way, the Tao sect wouldn't be unable to find the enemy behind the scenes, and in a rage, they would target the Thousand Autumn Sect. Third, they wanted to show the enemy that they were weak and see if they could find an opportunity. At the same time, they wanted to buy time. After all, he had used telepathy to call for backup. Unfortunately, while the idea was beautiful, the reality was cruel. First of all, he wasn't from the Eternal Heaven Sect. Even if he was, Zhuge Jin wouldn't be afraid at all. The people of the Tao sect had always been unyielding. They wouldn't dare to say that they would rather die standing than live kneeling, but it was close. Especially in the current situation, they would absolutely not shrink back in the slightest when it came to annihilating the future of the Tao sect. Perhaps it was because they knew this that all the forces retreated and didn't continue to provoke the Tao sect. Even if they wanted to kill Fang Qingshan and Peng Bo, they told them to be careful and not to expose themselves. Then again, regardless of whether he was the mastermind behind this operation or if it was really a coincidence, the result was that Fang Qingshan was almost forced to self-destruct. Although he wasn't dead, he suffered heavy losses. It was hard to say if he was injured at all. Just this point alone was enough for him to make a move. Therefore, in the face of his carrot and stick tactics, Zhuge Jin's expression didn't change at all. Oh. Chapter 1540. It's true, it's true. Chang Lushui seemed to be afraid that Zhuge Jin wouldn't believe him. This time, it was indeed my fault. I will definitely make it up to you. I am willing to take out an upper 3rd grade treasure to give to Fang Qingshan. I hope that Elder Zhuge will not hold it against me. For the sake of the Thousand Autumn Sect and the Eternal Heaven Sect, please forgive me. As he spoke, Chang Lushui forcefully endured the pain in his heart and took out a wooden fish. It was the superior level 3 treasure that he promised to compensate Zhuge Jin. Although he was a peak God Emperor, he didn't have many good items. Other than a top-notch level 3 sword, he only had the wormhole pearl and the troublesome wooden fish. However, it was worth it if he could use money to buy his life. Even if he lost the wormhole pearl and the troublesome wooden fish, the Eye of the Last Days could make up for it. So what if it's true? So what if it's fake? Zhuge Jin's voice was neither loud nor soft, neither fast nor slow. It was emotionless. Regardless of whether it's true or not, it's true that Fang Qingshan is injured. It's true that he almost self-destructed. It's also true that his foundation might have been damaged. As for face, face is mutual. If you don't give face to the Tao sect, why should I give face to the 1,000 Years sect and the Eternal Heaven sect? Compensation? That's a huge joke. If I kill you, not only will I take revenge, but I'll also get more compensation. Kill. 1,000 cups were too little when drinking with a bosom friend. Having said that, How could Chang Lushui not understand that Zhuge Jin would not rest until she killed him? He was also a decisive person, and without any hesitation, he made his move almost as soon as Zhuge Jin refused. The one who attacked first had the upper hand. He knew that he had to attack. Otherwise, if Zhuge Jin exploded, he wouldn't be able to turn the situation around. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of swords rang out incessantly. A shocking sword energy erupted. It could pierce through the universe and fall into the galaxy. There was not the slightest bit of smoke and fire, yet it seemed to separate heaven and earth, yin and yang, and sever life and death, leaving only good and evil, a clear distinction. The sharp aura was terrifying to the extreme, and it swept over like a destructive wave. Even the late divine emperor assassin had to retreat when the power swept across. However, when the terrifying aura swept past Fang Qingshan, it did not cause any pressure or harm to him. The reason for this was naturally because of Zhuge Jin's foresight and the mysterious power of the Xuanwu True Water Shield. Fang Qingshan's eyes lit up. However, Fang Qingshan still sensed the commotion. He opened his eyes and looked at Chang Lushui, who was unleashing his full power. He sighed emotionally. He's a peak divine emperor, after all. Even if he's an ordinary divine emperor, he shouldn't be underestimated. This was Fang Qingshan's first time witnessing a battle between peak deity emperors. His heart was shaken. An ant trying to shake a tree. How laughable. You overestimate yourself. Zhuge Jin chuckled and said. His tone was indifferent, but Chang Lushui felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. As expected, his senses weren't deceiving him. Zhuge Jin raised his hand and then brought it down. He didn't use any spiritual treasure, nor did he seem to have used any divine ability or combat skill. However, it was just a simple slap. It was like a slap. Without any warning, his sword Qi Storm was destroyed. Damn it! Chang Liushui's pupils constricted to the size of needles when he saw this. He laughed bitterly in his heart. They were both peak divine emperors, but the gap between them was too huge. If I can refine the eye of the last days, I won't be in such a passive position, even if I can't suppress Zhuge Jin. Chang Lushui couldn't help but feel excited when he thought of the eye of the last days might. The last days' divine ability was the nemesis of most divine abilities in the world. With it, he would have the foundation to settle down, and he wouldn't have to be afraid even if he had to travel the world. Unfortunately, although he had obtained the eye of the last days, he didn't have time to refine it. Distant water couldn't quench present thirst. Looks like I can only risk my life. Chang Lushui took in a deep breath. His hands formed a series of complicated hand seals, as if he was executing some kind of secret technique. Logically speaking, at this time, Zhuge Jin should have interfered. After all, even a lion would use its full strength to catch a rabbit. If he had any powerful moves, such as the one the second commander had used to summon the Arch Beheading Saber, it would be troublesome if he used it. He might even be able to counterattack. Many people were able to turn the tables around because of this trump card. But Zhuge Jin didn't. It wasn't that he was arrogant, but he was confident. It was like a saint facing a grand luo or a demi-saint. So what if the saint had some trump cards, or even an innate cardinal treasure? Although they were all at the peak of the divine emperor realm and had the same realm, the gap between their combat strength was even greater than that between the sages and those below the sages. Furthermore, he wanted to give Chang Lushui a bit of hope before destroying that hope. True despair was when one saw hope, but fell at the doorstep. Speaking of which, the secret technique that Chang Lushui used was actually an amplification-type secret technique, like the disintegration of the heavenly demon, the blood sacrifice, and so on. It was just of a higher level. In an instant, his entire body seemed to have turned into a withered leaf. His hair instantly turned white. 1,000 years in the blink of an eye, 10,000 years in an instant. 1,000 years sect, eternal heaven sect. They were of the same lineage. 1,000 years and 10,000 years not only referred to the history of their sect, but they were also a secret technique. Putting aside the eternal heaven sect, The two secret techniques of the 1,000-year sect were the 1,000 years dream and the 1,000 years in an instant. The eternal dream was somewhat similar to the primordial Buddhist sect's Tao validation technique in a dream. Reincarnating in dreams, experiencing all kinds of life and worldly affairs, honing one's state of mind, refining one's dharmic powers, and understanding laws. The 1,000 years in an instant was similar to the eternal heaven sect's eternal spring and autumn. They were both amplification-type secret techniques. The 1,000 years in an instant meant that one sacrificed one's lifespan, providence, merit, or other things in exchange for a period of power that would explode in an instant. However, such amplification-type secret techniques were fine if they were ordinary ones. If it were the explosive type, there would definitely be side effects, and the side effects would not be small. Looking at Chang Liushui's current situation, one would know a thing or two. However, in comparison, this wasn't really a solution, because if he did not use the secret technique, he would definitely die. However, if he used the secret technique, he might have a chance of survival. As for the side effects, if he lost his life, what was the point of talking about side effects? As long as he could survive, there might be a way to make up for it. After using the 1,000 years in an instant, Chang Liushui's aura rose steadily. If he was originally just an ordinary peak god emperor, then at this moment, Chang Liushui's aura had at least reached the level of a tidal god emperor. Moreover, it was not just red, but orange. Chapter 1541. That's all the 1,000 Autumns instant can do. Zhuge Jin looked on coldly, unfazed. As a member of the 1,000 Autumns sect under the Tao Will sect's sphere of influence, how could he not know about their secret techniques? It was precisely because he understood that he seemed to be unhurried and carefree. If it's your 1,000 Autumns sect master, old villain Demeng, who uses this technique, I might be a little afraid. But you? Kill. Chang Liushui ignored Zhuge Jin's mockery. When his aura reached its peak, he attacked decisively. His eyes shone brightly, and his whole body was twisted. If he didn't go crazy, he wouldn't be able to live. An extreme hatred exploded from within him. It even broke out of his body along the golden sword in his hand. Endless black light bloomed, and the sharp sword Qi gathered into a river, sweeping across the world. Sword intent, hatred, hatred, hatred. He hated the heavens for being unfair, and he hated the Tao for being heartless. This kind of hatred was unyielding, and it was a question to the heavens. It was a cry that came from his heart, a roar that came from all living beings. This kind of hatred could shake the heavens, the earth, and even the sun and moon. The stronger his hatred, the more terrifying the power he could erupt with. He hated himself for obtaining the eye of the last days so easily, and for attracting Zhuge Jin so quickly. He hated himself for not refining the eye of the last days before the tribulation came. He hated himself for being a peak god emperor, but the gap between him and Zhuge Jin was so huge. He hated Fang Qingshan, who was only a peak immortal emperor, but was able to erupt with the battle prowess of a late-stage god emperor. He hated the sword fell, and it contained a monstrous amount of hatred. The world of mortals and the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Although they seemed weak, ordinary, and could be seen everywhere, they contained an extremely powerful force. Happiness, anger, sorrow, and joy were all ordinary, but once they reached the extreme, they weren't inferior to other top-level laws. Chang Liushui's sword had erupted the hatred in his heart to the extreme. He hated the sword to the extreme, so he could reach the extreme of the sword. His hatred reached the extreme, and so did his sword technique. The sword descended. Golden light shone brilliantly, and the flames were resplendent. It was as if a group of stars were illuminated. One after another, hazy and imposing, they fell from the sky. Heaven and earth were overturned, and the great Tao wailed. For a time, the entire Fallen Dragon mystery realm was filled with extreme hatred. Apart from hatred, not to mention the 5 elements, yin and yang, even time, space, samsara, fate, and karma seemed to be excluded. The originally dim, boundless void was now pitch black like ink. It was the embodiment of hatred, and it dyed the heavens and the earth. It was as if it had descended from hell, carrying with it an extreme aura of death. It was as if the Grim Reaper's scythe had descended into the mortal world to reap lives and send them into reincarnation. Moreover, it was the kind that wouldn't stop until it reached its goal. The monstrous hatred turned into boundless energy that gathered in the torrent of sword chi. It could almost shatter the entire world. He wanted to tear Zhuge Jin into pieces. Actually, it wasn't just hatred that could erupt with unprecedented power. Anything that was cultivated to the extreme could erupt with unimaginable power. It was just that their emotions were easier to move. But it was also hard to control. The pros and cons all depended on oneself. If one could control it well, it would be a sharp weapon. If one could not control it well, it would be a devil. Chang Lushui obviously did not control it well. Previously, he was only using this sword technique. Then, the hatred in the sword technique evoked true hatred, and he was completely controlled by it. But it was also because of this that the sword technique's power was maximized. Nice! A gleam of light flashed through Zhuge Jin's eyes when she saw this sword strike, and she praised. Originally, he didn't think much of Chang Lushui. Even though the Thousand Autumn clan that he was born in was not bad, and he had the Eternal Heaven Gate behind him. But at the end of the day, he was just an ordinary peak divine emperor. He was even weaker than some late divine emperors and some mid-divine emperors. For example, if Fang Qingshan and Pang Bo were to advance to the mid-divine emperor realm, they would definitely not be at a disadvantage against him. They might even have the upper hand. And once they break through to the late divine emperor realm, they would definitely be able to beat Chang Lushui up. Therefore, even though Zhuge Jin knew that Chang Lushui was using the Thousand Autumn secret technique to increase his combat power, he didn't care at all. What was his bottom line? Even if the increase was huge, how much could he improve? Sure enough, under the secret technique's increase, Chang Liushui's cultivation base was only at the peak orange title Divine Emperor. However, it was this sword technique that contained extreme hatred that gave him a slight surprise. However, it was only a pleasant surprise and only a trace of it. If he could control the hatred and use it for himself, Zhuge Jin would look up to him again. Unfortunately, he was eroded by hatred and went to the lower levels. One should know that Zhuge Jin was the Dao Will Sect's technique elder. He was second only to the sect master. He had a high position and naturally had a high cultivation base. To be able to become the technique elder, his cultivation base couldn't be that bad. Although he wasn't a purple, blue, or green title Divine Emperor, he was a yellow title Divine Emperor. Although Chang Lushui had reached the level of an orange title Divine Emperor, he was still worlds apart from Zhuge Jin. World-destroying palm. Zhuge Jin exclaimed softly and extended his palm once again. It looked as light as a feather, like an elder caressing a child's head. It didn't seem fast, but no matter what, this palm seemed to have some kind of magical power that made it impossible for anyone to dodge or evade. It seemed to have sealed off all possibilities. Moreover, it had the ability to destroy everything. It was extremely eerie. The world-destroying palm was a great technique that Fang Qingshan wasn't unfamiliar with. This was because this ultimate technique was a part of the Myriad Worlds technique. As the name suggested, one palm could destroy an entire realm. It could be as small as a minor kiliacosm or as large as a chaotic world. Its power was unparalleled. As for how powerful it was, it depended on the person who performed it. With Zhuge Jin's cultivation base and the use of such a remarkable technique, the result was obvious. With a poof, the torrent of sword chi formed by the overwhelming hatred was directly smashed through by Zhuge Jin's palm. It even collided with the treasure sword, making a clanging sound. Zhuge Jin's hand was fine, and the treasure sword was fine too. Instead, it was Chang Liushui's hand that split open and blood splattered. There was also a strong force transmitted through the treasure sword, causing him to involuntarily stagger backward. For a moment, his red eyes couldn't help but reveal a look of horror. Chang Luxue didn't expect that even after he performed the ultimate technique of the Thousand Autumns sect, the instant of 1,000 autumns, and paid a huge price to raise his cultivation base to the orange title Divine Emperor, he still couldn't resist Zhuge Jin's attack. The only difference was that Zhuge Jin used a little more force. For a moment, he couldn't help but feel hopeless. Chapter 1542. What goes around comes around. What should be returned would be returned sooner or later. He paid a hefty price to use 1,000 autumns, just like when he used the wormhole pearl. He thought that everything was fine and that he would at least have a chance to catch his breath. However, Chang Luxue was overthinking. After all, the difference between him and Zhuge Jin was too great. Even if he used all his trump cards, he wouldn't be able to use any of them. On the contrary, what gave him hope in the end often made him feel hopeless. This was what Zhuge Jin wanted him to experience, even though he didn't immediately bring Fang Qingshan back to the Dao sect. If it wasn't for Qingshan being heavily injured today and needing to go back to recuperate, I would definitely let you have a taste of my techniques. Zhuge Jin was the Dao sect's elder of imparting techniques and usually looked like a good person. However, he was also an all-powerful, ruthless, and terrifying existence back then. After all, when the Dao sect's patriarch died back then, if he didn't act fiercely, everyone would probably pounce on him like a wolf that smelled blood. All these years, although he had cultivated himself, he was still Zhuge Jin. The only difference was that Chang Luxue happened to bump into this opening. The world-destroying palm. This was the magical power that came with the Innumerable Worlds technique. Although the Innumerable Worlds technique was lost and incomplete, the world-destroying palm was still all right as a magical power. At least it was complete for the God Emperor level. Even in the Dao sect, there weren't many that could compare to such a top-notch magical power. Zhuge Jin attacked in anger and used the world-destroying palm. It was already an honor for Chang Luxue to die in the hands of such a magical power. Crack! However, after the World Annihilation Palm destroyed the monstrous hatred, it continued to descend without slowing down at all, directly pressing down on the top of Chang Luxue's head. Chang Luxue was terrified at first, followed by shock and anger. He was naturally terrified because the top of his head was pressed. This was a fatal spot, especially when it was pressed by the world-destroying palm. If he wasn't careful, he would die. Fortunately, this situation didn't happen. He was shocked and angry because of what happened next. He might as well kill him with one palm. Chang Luxue's head was fine, and the rest of his body was fine as well. However, his knees were broken, and he was forced to kneel on the ground. Dong! The space in front of the fallen dragon's secret realm shook violently as cracks spread out like spiderwebs. Suck! At this moment, regardless of whether it was Duan Wei who was watching from afar while secretly sending messages and preparing to escape at any time, or Fang Qingshan who had been resting with his eyes closed as if he didn't care about anything, both of them widened their eyes, and their eyeballs seemed to be about to fall out. The situation on the field was completely out of their expectations. He was a peak divine emperor, not a cabbage. He was kneeling in front of the fallen dragon's secret realm without the slightest resistance. It was like an adult bullying a kindergartner. Zhuge Jin directly pressed him to the ground and rubbed him. For a moment, the surroundings were silent. Killing someone was but a nod of the head. Although he knew that Zhuge Jin would avenge him and wouldn't let Chang Luxue off easily, Fang Qingshan couldn't help but be shocked. This was a divine emperor, and a peak divine emperor at that. Even an ordinary peak divine emperor would be a big shot in the myriad worlds. But what was he seeing now? A peak divine emperor was kneeling in front of him. Even though he wasn't doing it willingly and was forced to do so, if word got out, the entire 1,000-year house and even the eternal heaven house would be humiliated. They would become a laughing stock in the future. They might even come knocking on their door. Because if they didn't get justice, the entire sect would be shamed and become an eternal disgrace. They would be nailed to the historical record of shame. It wasn't that no peak divine emperor had fallen. Not to mention divine emperors. There were many venerable emperors. But to be humiliated and kneel on the ground like this was really a first in history. If it wasn't handled well, the morale of the people would fall apart, and it would be difficult to lead the team. However, Zhuge Jin actually knew what was going on. He also knew that even if Chang Lushui attacked Fang Qingshan first, he was in the right. But if word of this really spread, the Dao sect would indeed be in big trouble. Fortunately, there were only 4 people present. Besides him, Fang Qingshan, Chang Lushui, and the late Divine Emperor who didn't look like a good person. There was only him. As long as the 2 of them were killed, the news wouldn't spread and naturally, nothing would happen. That was why he acted so unscrupulously. It was for himself, for Fang Qingshan, and for the Dao will sect to vent their anger. One should know that this time, after knowing that many people had secretly attacked and wanted to kill the future of the Dao will sect, the anger in their hearts was about to explode. Power, this is power. Fang Qingshan was speechless and held his breath. After a moment of silence, he was even more determined to pursue the Dao. The Great Way was boundless and endless. Originally, he thought that it was already very good for him to display the battle prowess of a late divine emperor when he was at the peak of a mortal realm, which was better than Jiang, Overlord, and the others. But this time, it was a blow to his head as soon as he came out. It was just a few early-stage divine emperor, dragon emperors, and commanders, but they had almost killed him. Chang Lushui, who appeared later, made him have no way to escape. Even the celestial chessboard, which he thought was foolproof, was useless. And at this moment, Chang Lushui, who made him beg for death, was like a 3-year-old child in the hands of Zhuge Jin. Such a scene was so shocking that he couldn't calm down. It was like a dream, and he couldn't believe his eyes. How could this not shock Fang Qingshan greatly? How could his will and belief not be strengthened? How could it make him thirst for power? For a moment, Duan Wei couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. Fortunately, he didn't run away. Chang Lushui, who was as strong as a peak divine emperor, was like this. How powerful was Zhuge Jin's cultivation? And how powerful was Sanbao divine emperor, who was even stronger than him? As for the venerable emperor, it was an existence that they couldn't even dream of. Was Chang Lushui weak? They were definitely not weak. To be able to reach the peak of divine emperor, their talents, opportunities, luck, and fortune were not weak. They all had their own experiences and would never lack opportunities and good fortune. Therefore, no one would be weaker than the other. However, he still ended up like this. This could only mean that Zhuge Jin was indeed extraordinary. Not to mention the others. At this moment, Chang Lushui was going crazy. The others couldn't imagine this ending, so naturally, he couldn't either. How could I? How dare I? At first, Chang Lushui was stunned. He thought that he wasn't a match for Zhuge Jin and that he might die, but he didn't expect to be humiliated like this. When he regained his senses, he naturally struggled. Chapter 1543. Get up, get up, get up. Chang Lushui struggled, just like the Monkey King who had just been pressed under the 5-finger mountain by the Buddha. He tried in vain to turn the situation around, to break free, and to stand up. Boom! Chang Lushui also exploded in an instant, going all out. Everything from the 1,000 years moment, blood sacrifice, burning magic power, primordial spirit, blood chi, and so on, as long as it could be used, as long as it could increase his power, even if it was just a tiny bit, he used it all. At this moment, he could no longer care or choose to forget whether doing this would damage his foundation, whether he would have a chance of survival after using it, what would happen if he broke free, whether he would lose his life. He did not care about any of these. At this moment, he only had one thought, and that was to stand up. He would rather die standing than live kneeling. Common people said that heaven, earth, and masters kneel to heaven, earth, and parents. At their level, not even the great Tao was worth kneeling to, much less heaven, earth, and masters. Not to mention kneeling, they rarely even bowed to their superiors. But now, he was kneeling in front of Zhuge Jin, and he was facing Fang Qingshan. He knew that this was Zhuge Jin avenging Fang Qingshan. Shame, anger, unwillingness, and all sorts of other emotions intertwined in his heart. He was about to go crazy and explode. If Zhuge Jin had forced him to kneel, he would have been fine. He was just not as skilled. But kneeling to Fang Qingshan was a complete humiliation. The meaning was completely different. For a moment, Chang Liushui's entire body was glowing. His entire person was like a volcano that was about to erupt, or an atomic bomb that was about to explode. Boundless light radiated, and boundless heat radiated. It was as if a divine sun had been born on the ground. He was doing his best to resist, disregarding the price he had to pay. He wanted to break free, but it was difficult for him to do so. It was just like how Sun Wukong could not lift the five-finger mountain no matter what. Moreover, as if to better torture Chang Lushui and let him feel that kind of despair, Zhu Gajin did not directly kill him with one palm. Instead, she pressed down bit by bit, increasing her strength bit by bit. It seemed like Chang Lushui could break free with just a little more strength, but he was always a little short. His body was cracking and his spine was shattering. Starting from the knees, inch by inch, he was like a weathered stone, turning into powder. Even so, Chang Lushui was still unable to resist at all. He was pressed to the ground by a palm, and his spine was broken. Resistance was futile. Roar! Chang Lushui roared. If this were any other day, his roar would have been enough to shatter the crimson firmament world, or even an even more powerful chaos world. But today, he wasn't able to cause any damage at all. That seemingly ordinary, callous palm that landed on his skull was like a five-fingered divine mountain, firmly suppressing him. All of his essence, energy, and soul were imprisoned within his body, making it hard for him to move. Zhuge Jin, are you going to fight to the death with my Thousand Autumn sect and Eternal Ancient Heaven sect? Chang Lushui finally gave up when he realized that he was unable to break free no matter how hard he tried. However, the humiliation, anger, and other negative emotions intertwined his heart. He looked at Zhuge Jin, wishing he could eat her flesh and sleep on her skin. A scholar prefers death to humiliation. Although he already knew that he wasn't Zhuge Jin's opponent, he didn't expect that he would be so weak that he couldn't even withstand one move. No, half a move. He couldn't help but feel dispirited. Most importantly, he didn't expect Zhuge Jin to treat him like this. They weren't in public, and there were only 4 of them. But he was still so ashamed that he wanted to kill himself. After all, he was a heaven's favorite, and he was now a powerful figure. But now, he couldn't even fight back against Zhuge Jin. He was forced to kneel on the ground, and his spine was broken. At the same time, his will was broken. In other words, Zhuge Jin's palm wasn't just humiliating him, it was also crippling him. Even if Zhuge Jin didn't kill him today, he would be living a life worse than death, like a walking corpse. From then on, whenever he saw Zhuge Jin, he would avoid her like a mouse seeing a cat. If he couldn't get over this barrier in his heart, he wouldn't even be able to take another step forward, let alone become a venerable emperor. What's more, as the demon in his heart grew stronger, his cultivation level would deteriorate day by day, just like losing his cultivation. Zhuge Jin chuckled. Thousand Autumn sect? Eternal Ancient Heaven sect? Eternal Ancient Heaven sect? Did you think of this when you attacked Fang Qingshan? Only officials can set fires, but ordinary people can't? So what if it's the Eternal Ancient Heaven sect, let alone the Thousand Autumn sect? Do you really think the Tao will sect is afraid of them? Zhuge Jin's voice was like the waves of the sea, pushing forward layer by layer. At first, it was calm, but later it sounded like thunder. No one can bully the disciples of the Tao, will sect without paying a heavy price. You're no exception, and neither is the Eternal Ancient Heaven sect. I hope they don't leave any evidence behind, or else. Zhuge Jin didn't finish her sentence, but the thread in her words was clear. As for you, Sai, Taoist Zhuge, let people go when possible. Before Zhuge Jin could finish her sentence, something unexpected happened. Buzz. Right next to Fang Qingshan, the 8-gem Ru-E umbrella, which had been put away by the Treasurefall coin, suddenly flew out and landed on Chang Lushui. Bang! Fang Qingshan's body had just recovered a little, but the shock caused it to crumble again. However, Fang Qingshan couldn't care less. He looked at the 8-gem Ru-E umbrella in fear. He hadn't expected the treasure to be able to break free after being sealed by the treasure fall coin. It was a fatal hidden danger. If Chang Lushui hadn't been in danger today, if Zhuge Jin hadn't been right in front of him, if the 8-gem Ru-E umbrella hadn't been aimed at him, at the thought of this, Fang Qingshan almost broke out in a cold sweat. It seems like it's not that easy to take advantage of others. I must remember this lesson next time. Some things can't be taken lightly even if I have them. Putting aside the myriad of thoughts running through Fang Qingshan's mind, the 8-gem Ru-E umbrella flew out with a swoosh after being activated. As for the black tortoise water shield that was protecting Fang Qingshan, it didn't stop it at all. This was because this treasure could only defend against external attacks and not internal attacks. However, it was fortunate that this was the case. Otherwise, if the two treasures collided, Fang Qingshan would probably be finished. Didn't they see that his body crumbled again after being shocked for a moment? Zhuge Jin was also surprised by the appearance of the 8-gem Ru-E umbrella. At first, he thought that the divine emperor of the 3-gem Ru-E umbrella had come personally. For a moment, he felt as though he was facing a great enemy. When he realized that it had flown out from Fang Qingshan's body, he heaved a sigh of relief. However, he became even more furious. Chapter 1544. Zhuge Jin was no stranger to the Sanbao Shenhuang. After all, the School of Freedom and the School of Tao were not far apart, and their strengths were similar. He and the Sanbao Shenhuang were both peak deity emperors and had fought more than once or twice. Actually, even without fighting, one would understand after seeing the 8 treasures Ru-E umbrella. The 8 treasures Ru-E umbrella was the Sanbao Shenhuang's special treasure. Under normal circumstances, such an item would not leave his body. Therefore, upon seeing this treasure, Zhuge Jin thought the Sanbao Shenhuang had arrived. From their previous fights, though no one had given it their all, he was still slightly inferior. Therefore, Zhuge Jin was a little alarmed. However, he soon realized that only this treasure had arrived. The Sanbao Shenhuang had not. He sighed in relief. Otherwise, it would be troublesome to deal with Chang Lushui. But when he regained his composure and remembered that the treasure had flown out from Fang Qingshan, his expression changed. Thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind, and it didn't take long for him to understand. He must have lent this treasure to someone else to deal with Fang Qingshan. However, Fang Qingshan was more skilled and killed him. He even took the 8 treasures Ru-E umbrella. This time, it was only the imprint within the 8 treasures Ru-E umbrella that had been activated. After understanding this, Zhuge Jin was both angry and afraid. He was angry because the Sanbao Shenhuang and the School of Freedom were obviously involved in this attack on the School of Tao Will and Fang Qingshan. The reason was simple. With a treasure like the 8 treasures Ru-E umbrella, if he did not lend it out himself, even if someone wanted to steal it, he would immediately notice. Once he noticed, he could immediately use the imprint within the treasure to retrieve it. How could it be used? The Sanbao Shenhuang, the School of Freedom. Good, very good. Zhuge Jin was so angry his entire body was shaking. Though he knew that there was definitely more than one mastermind behind this operation, he had originally thought that the Thousand Autumns House was the one behind this attack against Fang Qingshan. After all, they had sent out a peak deity emperor like Chang Lushui. He did not think that there would be the School of Freedom and the Sanbao Shenhuang. Zhuge Jin did not know that other than these two forces, there was also the Martial Pinnacle sect. They had even used their most valuable treasure, the Emperor Beheading Saber. Putting all of this aside, the thing that angered Zhuge Jin the most was that the 3 treasures Divine Emperor actually had the face to interfere at this time, telling her to let Chang Lushui go. It was truly shameless and laughable. In fact, the 3 treasures Divine Emperor had no choice but to make a move at this time. All of this began when Chang Lushui asked Duan Wei to send a letter for help. Because distant water could not quench present thirst, Chang Lushui had originally wanted to delay for a while. Unfortunately, he had not expected the gap between him and Zhuge Jin to be so huge. In just a few moves, he had almost lost his life. Duan Wei had no choice but to report this urgent situation. The person behind the scenes naturally wouldn't let a peak Divine Emperor die just like that. At this time, only Sanbao Divine Emperor could make a move because his 8-gem Ru E umbrella was still here. This was also the reason why the 3 Treasures Divine Emperor had to make a move. Although he knew that if he made a move now, he would infuriate Zhuge Jin even more. Even if he did not make a move now, Zhuge Jin would still know that he was behind this. The situation was the same anyway. Moreover, he couldn't let the 8-gem Ru E umbrella fall into someone else's hands. Since that was the case, he might as well make a move now and intimidate Zhuge Jin. After all, there were too many people making a move this time. If he exposed himself, the Dao sect could only swallow their pride. This way, he might even be able to save Chang Lushui and make the Eternal Heaven sect owe him a favor. Therefore, just as Chang Lushui was about to be tortured to death by Zhuge Jin, the 3 Treasures Divine Emperor made a move. Bang! The 8-gem Ru E umbrella flew out from Fang Qingshan's body and instantly broke through the Xianwu water shield. It broke through the void and appeared beside Zhuge Jin and Chang Lushui. Then it transformed into a long spear. With a flick, Zhuge Jin's palm that was pressing on Chang Liushui's head was pushed away. Then it opened at lightning speed. In an instant, auspicious light surged and auspicious qi condensed. There were precious pearls, lotuses, paintings, canopies, treasures, and other treasures surging. Purple clouds appeared, the 3 illuminating true light, and floating clouds and flying flowers. Thousands of rays of light bloomed like flowers, tinkling and clanging. There were sounds of the heavens, words of nature, and books of alchemy and jade glowing. Then, above the treasured umbrella, an illusory figure materialized. He wore a crown that faced the heavens and was dressed in Taoist robes. A 5-color divine sword hung at his waist. His face was hazy, as if he was born in the infinite space. Whether it was the past, the present, or the future, it was difficult to find his face. However, time and space overlapped and intertwined, and his shadow could be seen. 3 Treasures Divine Emperor. Seeing this person, Zhuge Jin's expression turned solemn. He didn't attack immediately, but spat out 2 words coldly. Greetings, Taoist Zhuge. 3 Treasures Divine Emperor bowed to Zhuge Jin without any awkwardness. The Taoist has already punished Taoist Chang. Why don't we just let go? After all, if this matter were to spread, even the Taoist and the Tao sect wouldn't have it easy. Is the Taoist threatening me? Zhuge Jin said with a livid expression. So what if it gets out? At most, the 1,000-year sect and Eternal Heaven sect will attack the Tao sect out of anger. Do you think I'm afraid of them? If they were capable, they wouldn't be so petty. As for you, I haven't even reprimanded you yet. Why did the 8 Treasures Rui umbrella appear here? Aren't you embarrassed to plead for others? Haha, 3 Treasures Divine Emperor, Freedom Sect, I'll remember this. The Tao sect will also remember this. The mountains will never change, and the rivers will always flow. It's not that I won't repay you, it's just that the time hasn't come yet. After a pause, as if he had vented his anger, Zhuge Jin regained his composure and looked at 3 Treasures Divine Emperor disdainfully. If you were here in person, I might have given you some leeway. Now, you're trying to take me down with just the mark of a treasure. Do you really think you've become an emperor? Today, I'll leave your 8 Treasures Rui umbrella behind as interest. In the future, I'll settle the score with you personally. I'd like to see who's the winner in a battle of life and death. 3 Treasures Divine Emperor had miscalculated. He didn't know that the Tao sect was indeed not prepared for a full-scale war. However, deep in his bones, he would rather die than live in dishonor. Although he held back, he wasn't completely tolerant. He would still attack decisively when the time came. If they weren't prepared, would the other sects really dare to attack them? If that was the case, wouldn't it be better to attack them together? Why would they only attack secretly? If that was the case, why did the other sects hold back when the Dao sect attacked? Therefore, as long as they had a sense of propriety, everything would be under control. Oomph. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhuge Jin snorted coldly and attacked. Chapter 1545. Once she made a move, it would be a fatal move. Spirit-destroying finger. However, when Zhuge Jin pointed with her finger, there was not much of a commotion. It was as if she had casually pointed with her finger. Not to mention Chang Liushui's attack. Even the commotion caused by the Dragon Emperor and the Great Commander's attacks could not be compared to it. During the whole process, there was no Dharma power or magic power. Every move was natural and easy, as if it was done according to one's will. The divine object concealed itself and returned to its original state. Although Zhuge Jin's move seemed as simple as gently brushing off the dust on his body, it was a real killing move. Zhuge Jin, how dare you? As expected, when it saw Zhuge Jin's attack, the expression of the three treasures' divine emperor's body changed. Without a second thought, it immediately activated the 8 treasures Rui umbrella with all its might. Then, the entire imprint tried to enter the umbrella with a whoosh. Don't blame him for being so shocked. It was indeed the spirit-destroying finger's natural enemy. The spirit-destroying finger, as its name suggested, was an attack that specifically targeted spirituality. It was like the space-time nails restrain on space and time. This magic power also had a strong restraining effect on spiritual treasures, elixirs, natural spiritual objects, and other spiritual objects. If the treasure-fall coin was only a seal to the 8-gem Ru-E umbrella, then the spirit-destroying finger was the real killing move. In fact, as the Dao sect's technique imparting elder, Zhuge Jin knew a lot of things and could always find a way to restrain it. When he fought, it was easy and casual. If he didn't have a special method or a suppressive advantage, few people at the same level could suppress him. Of course, there were advantages and disadvantages. Multitasking and being distracted, the more he knew, the more things he could do. Although he wasn't like Murong Fu, who had a lot of things but was not good at it, it still greatly delayed his progress. If he focused on one, his cultivation would at least improve, even if he didn't break through to Venerable Emperor. No matter how shocked and angry the Sanbao Divine Emperor was, it couldn't change the outcome at all. Although the 8-gem Ru-E umbrella swayed, the wind and clouds howled, the sun and the moon turned upside down, giving off endless light and the sound of dragons and tigers, the umbrella was raised high, and a curtain of pearls hung down. Strings of pearls and lotuses bloomed to protect him, trying to resist the spirit-destroying finger. But it was all in vain. Crack! Not long after, the divine emperor of 3 treasures, who had been calm and confident just a moment ago, had just entered the treasured umbrella when his entire body stiffened. He was hit by Zhuge Jin's finger. Then his entire body was like a cracked porcelain, instantly bursting apart. Actually, the reason why such a situation occurred was not because the 3 treasures divine emperor was inferior to Zhuge Jin, nor was it because the 8 treasures Rui umbrella was too trashy. It was only because of the disparity in strength and the favorable timing. First, Fang Qingshan used the treasure fall coin to seal the 8-gem wishful umbrella. Because of Duan Wei's message, 3 treasures Celestial Emperor was asked to take action. Therefore, he activated the brand in the umbrella, relying on the strength of a peak divine emperor. Although he broke free from the seal of the treasure fall coin, it was not without paying a price. At the very least, he had consumed a lot of his source energy. After all, the distance was too great. Although he had activated the brand, it was only because of Duan Wei's reminder that he knew that the 8-gem Ru-E umbrella might have fallen into someone else's hands. Otherwise, wouldn't it have been better for the 3 treasures divine emperor to make a move while the great commander and the others were still here? There would have been no need for Chang Liushui to make a move, and Zhuge Jin would not have come. Moreover, This place was a little far from the Gate of Freedom, where the three treasures divine emperor was. Even with his peak divine emperor cultivation, his power could not be transmitted across endless space-time. Of course, the most important thing was that he was facing Zhuge Jin. Even if the three treasures divine emperor personally came, so what? Although he was more powerful than Zhuge Jin, there was still a limit to what he could do. If this was already the case for the main body, there was no need to mention a spiritual treasure. Moreover, Zhuge Jin had used the spirit extermination hand, which was specialized in restraining spiritual treasures. In particular, the three treasures divine emperor had manifested the brand. In this way, the favorable timing, location, and people naturally appeared relaxed and casual. It was better than taking a stroll in a courtyard. He appeared relaxed and casual, but Chang Lushui was in complete despair. Really, the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. If he had known that this would happen, he would have let Zhuge Jin kill him with one palm from the beginning. He would not have had to go through so many ups and downs. Perhaps he would have felt better. First, he escaped twice, and even used the wormhole pearl to no avail. Then, he exploded twice, but he was still like the monkey sun in the palm of the Buddha, unable to overturn the sky. Finally, he asked Duan Wei to ask for help. The three treasures divine emperor attacked, but it still did not shake Zhuge Jin's mind. Zhuge Jin knew what Chang Lushui was thinking, but this was also what he wanted him to feel. Seeing the despair that was even thicker than the hatred he had before, Zhuge Jin felt indescribably happy. If he did not torture them to the point of collapse, how could he vent the hatred in his heart and the Tao will sect? 8 Treasures Rui Umbrella. After Zhuge Jin destroyed the three treasures divine emperor's brand, he snorted and waved his hand, putting the treasure into his bag. The Gate of Freedom, 3 treasures, 3 origins, Taichu Heaven. The palace was extremely tall, and the tower was ethereal. The south of the cave was green pines and green cypresses, and the north of the cave was green willows and red peaches. Occasionally, mountain birds would talk to each other, and cranes would fly together. Sometimes, there would be elks holding flowers, and, occasionally, mountain monkeys offering fruits. The fragrance of flowers was strong, and clouds were blooming, covering the sky and earth. The entire cave was like a space of the origin of heaven and earth. Heavenly flowers fell continuously. Golden lotuses bloomed. Golden rainbows streaked across the sky, and the moon hid and the sun rose. All of these were lost. Being in there, even if one did not cultivate, their realm would increase little by little under the influence of imperceptible influence. In the center of the cave, there was an ancient tree with fragrant green branches and gloomy green leaves. It was majestic and lofty, not to mention Fong Qingshan's world tree clone. Even the level 3 spirit root lotus of bliss that he had just integrated into the timeless arc was a junior compared to it. The sky could not be seen above its head, and its roots seeped into time and space. Thousands of roots were like dragons connecting to the cave. The branches and leaves covered the sky, and the wind brought joy. When the wind blew, the ancient tree swayed, and the entire world of the cave responded, clanking like the sound of heaven. Under the ancient tree, there was a Tao field. The wind and clouds were cold, and the bamboo path was quiet. There were few people here, and the Tao heart was born in silence. In the Tao field, there was a Taoist sitting on a cloud couch. It seemed like he was here, but it also seemed like he had entered the endless time and space. His figure was indistinct, and it was impossible to distinguish his true appearance. Endless light shrouded him, and an endless halo hung behind his head. It was truly an auspicious Tao field, and rainbow light surrounded the divine emperor. The light of treasures surrounded him, and a rain of flowers bloomed. His body shone with 1,000 colors, and his eyebrows shone with 10,000 lights, becoming one with the Tao. Who could this person be, if not the three treasures divine emperor? Every time he inhaled, breathed, and moved, the wheel of the world revolved. The wind blew, the clouds surged, and thunder was born. Chapter 1546. Sigh, I miscalculated this time. The Sanbao Divine Emperor's cultivation was even higher than Zhuge Jin's. As one of the higher-ups of the Freedom Sect, he had the potential to become an emperor. One could imagine how high his status was. This time, he didn't care about the Dao sect's intervention. He didn't agree or oppose it. However, since the sect needed it, he would support it. Therefore, not only did he separate a strand of his own sword energy to seal, he also lent out the 8-gem Root E umbrella. He thought it was foolproof. After all, he'd heard that the Martial Pinnacle sect had even used the Emperor Slayer blade. Unfortunately, no matter how much he thought about it, he still couldn't beat God. He never would have thought that the chief commander and the others would fail, and fail so miserably. Despite having so many trump cards, they couldn't even take care of Fangqing Shan, a peak immortal realm being. Instead, they'd lost themselves. If Duan Wei hadn't sent a message to the Thousand Autumn sect and contacted him, he wouldn't have even sensed that his 8-gem Ru E umbrella was missing. Most importantly, Chang Lushui had made a move but still hadn't succeeded. In the end, Zhuge Jin had even targeted him. Now, he was in grave danger. As for the Thousand Autumn sect, or Eternal Heaven sect's message, the Sanbao Divine Emperor thought about it and decided to help. It didn't matter whether he helped or not. If he helped, at least the Eternal Heaven sect would owe him a favor. Moreover, while he wasn't sure, he didn't think Zhuge Jin would be too reckless. Unfortunately, he'd thought too much. Though they weren't ready for a full-scale war, couldn't they just punish him a little to warn him? At some point, Zhuge Jin pointed with a finger and destroyed the 8-gem Ru E umbrella's imprint. The Sanbao Divine Emperor suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were unfathomable, showing a horrifying scene of a world being born and destroyed. He grunted and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. How dare you, Zhuge Jin? How dare you? He never would have thought that Zhuge Jin would not only reject him, but also erase the imprint on his 8-gem Ru E umbrella and take away his ultimate treasure. She was going to fight to the death with him. His gaze shifted, as if he had already cast his gaze onto the fallen dragon mystery realm, staring at Zhuge Jin. His gaze was cold like a waterfall. He snorted and stood up with one hand on the 5-color divine sword at his waist, as if he was ready to strike at any moment. However, in the end, he still had some misgivings in his heart. He could attack without caring about anything, but if he pulled one hair, it would affect the entire sect. Once an all-out war broke out, it would not be a good thing for the entire Freedom Sect. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. At that time, it was very likely that he and the Freedom Sect would be the vanguard, while others would be the ones to benefit. This was something he absolutely did not want to see. After weighing the pros and cons, his chest moved a few times. After hesitating for a moment, he took another deep look at the sword and slowly removed his hand from the sword. He slowly sat down and calmed down. Zhuge Jin, right? I'll remember you. I'll leave the 8-gem Ru E umbrella with you for a period of time. I'll make a move in the future. After Zhuge Jin erased the imprint on the 8-gem Ru E umbrella, he did not attack immediately. Instead, he waited to see how the 3-treasure Divine Emperor would react and whether he would attack directly. If he dared to do so, he would have to deal with the Freedom Sect first. As for the losses and consequences, he could not care less. However, after a while, seeing that there was no reaction, he could not help but smirk. Indeed, the stubborn were afraid of the reckless, and the reckless were afraid of the reckless. As long as the Dao sect dared to cut themselves, who would be willing to offend them at this time? The burr that sticks out gets shot. After understanding the 3-treasure Divine Emperor's misgivings, Zhuge Jin sneered. Then, he reached out and pressed his hand on the top of his head again. This time, there were no more surprises. Chang Lushui did not resist, and Zhuge Jin did not play around. I can't accept this. In the end, Chang Lushui let out a final mournful roar. His voice shook the boundless void. It was truly heart-wrenching and tear-inducing. Then his entire body was completely crushed into powder. Both his physical body and primordial spirit were no exception. His body and soul were completely destroyed. In the end, He stretched out his hand towards a void and grabbed Chang, Liu Shui's true spirit, like he was fishing. He squeezed it hard. Whoosh! For a time, the boundless void where the fallen dragon mystery realm was located was filled with mournful music. Even the heavens and the earth could clearly hear it. There was a downpour that was as red as blood. In the sky above the fallen dragon mystery realm, one scroll after another unfolded. There was a phenomenon in the sky when someone was born. There was a child growing up. There was a person learning from a master. There was a person fighting for a sect. There was a person searching for secrets. There was a person encountering danger. There was a person obtaining a fortuitous encounter. He grew step by step and finally became a powerhouse. The final scene was the surprise of obtaining the last AI, the contempt he felt for Fang Qingshan, the fear he felt when he met Zhuge Jin, and the final unwilling roar. The figure in all these scrolls was the same person. Who else could it be if not Chang Lu Shui? This was the true spirit imprint that belonged to him. It was displaying his life's experiences. Soon, it turned into a rain of light and dissipated between the heavens and the earth. A peak divine emperor had fallen. In the boundless void, venerable emperors were naturally the supreme beings in the universe. However, divine emperors were really rare. In the past million years, not a single one had become a divine emperor. Moreover, once a divine emperor became a divine emperor, they would normally retire from the world unless there were special circumstances. They would either hide in their respective Taoist rites or travel to various dangerous places that were rarely visited by humans. Therefore, under such circumstances, divine emperors were the supreme beings. Among the divine emperors, peak divine emperors were naturally the most powerful. Regardless of whether it was a force like the Tao, Will sect, or the even more powerful forces like the Sacred Buddha clan and the Heavenly Evil clan, peak divine emperors were existences that could influence the overall situation. Therefore, the death of a peak divine emperor was naturally a major event in the entire boundless void and the universe. Therefore, the heavens and the earth wept and wailed for him. This could be considered as his final glory. Sigh. Seeing this scene, Fang Qingshan sighed softly. It was not that he could not bear to see Chang Lu Shui die, but he lamented that human life was as insignificant as grass. He was a peak divine emperor, who was only one step away from becoming a venerable sovereign. Although he might never be able to take that step, he was still a powerful figure in a region. Now, he had died just like that, let alone the others. Moreover, this matter had nothing to do with him. It would have been fine if he had only heard about it. But the most important thing was that he had died right in front of him. Moreover, he had fallen because of him. This kind of shock was not small at all. As for Duan Wei, he wanted to cry, but had no tears. Right now, he didn't even dare to move, let alone escape. Even a peak divine emperor like Chang Lu Shui could not escape from Zhuge Jin's hands, let alone him. Duan Wei could only hope that he did not attack Fang Qingshan. The Tao sect was very clear about gratitude and grudges, and that Zhuge Jin would not take him seriously. Chapter 1547. This time, Duan Wei, who was sent out, really regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. The mission rewards were generous, so generous that even he was tempted. This was also one of the reasons he was sent out. Firstly, it was a request from the sect. Secondly, it was because of the benefits. But when he set off, he knew that the situation was bad. After all, everyone knew that the Tao sect had already made a move. If he went and bumped into them, the consequences would be obvious. As expected, the situation was just as he had expected. But it was even worse. Fortunately, he did not make a move. There was still Chang Lu Shui in front of him. Therefore, he hoped that he could get lucky. He hoped that Zhuge Jin would just treat him as a passerby and not care about him. Regardless of what Duan Wei was thinking, no one knew or cared. At this moment, everyone in the universe was shocked by Chang Liu Shui's death. Is this a venerable emperor or a peak divine emperor dead? It's probably a peak divine emperor dead. If it was a venerable emperor, the commotion would be even bigger. It wouldn't just be the cries of the Taoists and the rain of blood. These are troubled times. A peak divine emperor has already died. Who knows how much more will happen in the future? What exactly happened? Was it an accident, or was it not an accident? Who cares? We'll deal with it when it comes. Instead of thinking so much, we might as well focus on cultivation. The entire universe felt Chang Liu Shui's death and was shaken. A formless sense of urgency came over them. The atmosphere suddenly became much more oppressive. Other people might not know what was going on, but the people who attacked the Tao will sect this time quickly knew what was going on. The others were fine, but the Thousand Autumn sect and the Eternal Heaven sect were furious. They felt like they had gone for wool and come home shorn. A peak divine emperor. Even if he was not a title divine emperor, he was still a mainstay of the sect. Losing him just like that was bad news for the entire Thousand Autumn sect. To the Eternal Heaven sect, it was a matter of face. Knowing that Chang Liu Shui was from the Thousand Autumn sect and had the Eternal Heaven sect behind him, the Dao sect showed no mercy. This was clearly a slap in the face. According to the Eternal Heaven sect's personality, they would have fought their way to the sect. Unfortunately, he was not in the right this time. Moreover, at this moment, the Dao sect was also in a state of eruption. If they were not careful, a battle might break out between the two sections. The Eternal Heaven sect wasn't afraid of the Dao sect, but they didn't want to benefit from the fight between the Sandpiper and the Clam. On this point, he was the same as the Three Treasures Divine Emperor. Great minds think alike, so he could only endure it for now. It was precisely because of this that after the Dao sect made a move, everyone hurriedly stopped. Of course, it was also because even though they hadn't completely achieved their objective, they had still completed 50% of it. It was also because of this that Zhuge Jin dared to attack Chang Liu Shui without holding back. She didn't give the Eternal Heaven Gate or the Three Treasures Divine Emperor any face and left the 8 Treasures Rui umbrella behind. All right, Qing Shan, let's go back. You don't have to worry. Although your injuries this time are serious, they're nothing serious. Even if your foundation is damaged, the sect has treasures to help you recover. After killing Chang Liu Shui, Zhuge Jin was finally in a better mood. However, she thought of the series of things that needed to be dealt with in the future. Coupled with the fact that Fang Qingshan's injuries couldn't be delayed any longer, she turned around and said to Fang Qingshan. Zhuge Jin couldn't be more satisfied with Fang Qingshan's performance this time. Good fella, he had the combat power of a late-stage god emperor with the strength of a peak immortal realm. This time, if it wasn't for his bad luck in meeting Chang Liu Shui or the shameless people from the Thousand Autumn sect who sent a peak god emperor, he probably wouldn't even need to do anything and would be fine. However, good fortune is accompanied by misfortune, and misfortune is accompanied by fortune. Although he was in a precarious situation, he managed to turn misfortune into fortune and didn't suffer too much damage. Just as he said, even if his foundation was damaged, the Dao sect had treasures to help him recover. Once the recovery was completed and he digested the experience of this incident, Fang Qingshan's breakthrough to the God Emperor level was almost a matter of course. Once he broke through, he would definitely become a title God Emperor and a high-grade title God Emperor at that. This was the biggest piece of good news at the moment. Thank you, Elder, for coming all the way to save me. Fang Qingshan hurriedly expressed his gratitude. It was cool to lean against a big tree. If he wasn't a disciple of the Dao sect, who would come to save him this time? Even if someone came to save him, would they have the ability to face a peak God Emperor? After getting injured, he could only rely on himself to slowly recover. Although he hadn't joined the Dao sect for long, Fang Qingshan's sense of belonging to the Dao sect wasn't any weaker than the disciples who were trained since they were young. After all, the human heart was made of flesh. After he joined the Dao sect, he first obtained 3 top-grade treasures from the secret vault. Now that he was in danger, the technique imparting Elder even spared no effort to save him. How could he not be touched? All right, let's go. Zhuge Jin naturally felt Fang Qingshan's gratitude, and the smile on her face deepened. Everyone liked grateful people. She grabbed Fong Qingshan and didn't take out any spiritual treasure spaceship. She was most afraid of ungrateful people who thought that everything was as it should be. She took a step forward, but her speed wasn't slow at all. It looked like she was taking a leisurely stroll, but in the blink of an eye, she was in another world. At least, Fong Qingshan couldn't catch up with her when she was driving the timeless Arkansas Duan. Wei instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the disappearing figures of Fong Qingshan and Zhuge Jin, as he thought that Zhuge Jin had overlooked him and thought that his life was safe. Unfortunately, a smile had just hung on the corners of his mouth when his entire body stiffened, and it wasn't long before he transformed into a fluorescent light that filled the sky and dispersed into nothingness in an instant. However, he was only a late god emperor. After his death, other than the place where he was, there wasn't as much movement as Chang Lushui. When Zhuge Jin brought Fong Qingshan back to the Dao sect, Qian Duo and the others also brought Pang Bo and the others back to the Dao sect. However, some of them returned with themselves, while some returned empty-handed. Obviously, although the Dao sect found out in time and took action quickly, the distant water couldn't quench the immediate thirst. Some disciples didn't manage to rescue them in time and were killed, including many intersect elites and even true disciples. Fortunately, the 11 disciples who were promoted to the top 10 intersect disciples at the same time as Fong Qingshan and became true disciples were all unscathed, which was considered as a blessing in misfortune. Perhaps it was because the heavens helped the lucky ones, turning misfortunes into blessings. Moreover, the others weren't like Fong Qingshan, who had 3 secret forces and each of them had a trump card. In the end, the Dao sect even sent a late god emperor to kill Fong Qingshan. Although the late god emperor was not used and lost his life in vain, if it was someone else, he might not be so lucky. Chapter 1548. The 3 forces acted at the same time, and even sent a late divine emperor to kill him. After all, Pang Bo also received the same treatment and was not alone. Unfortunately, he met a peak deity emperor like Chang Lushui. Fong Qingshan really did not look at the almanac when he went out. There were so many twists and turns. If it weren't for Fong Qingshan's many tricks, high cultivation, and good luck, there would have been nothing left of him. To be honest, Fong Qingshan relied on himself to get to where he was today. As for the others, they weren't as unlucky. Although the dangers they encountered were also extremely dangerous, with the exception of Pang Bo, they were all fine. Furthermore, they all had their own sects, clans, and trump cards bestowed upon them by their masters, so they were able to persevere. Speaking of this, it was necessary to mention their respective trump cards. For people like Fong Qingshan, the trump cards he had were all derived from his various opportunities. The 3 commanders' trump cards were given by their sections. Generally speaking, as a seed disciple of a sect or a disciple valued by a master or a clan, they would more or less be given some trump cards to save their lives, escape, or fight back. This was the case for Pang Bo, Jiang Shan, and the others. This time, Taoist, Zhuge Jin, Qian Duo, and the others almost regretted their actions. The others had trump cards given by their clans, masters, and sects, but Fong Qingshan did not. Firstly, he did not have a clan. As for his master, although he joined the Taoist sect, he was still alone. When others advanced to the successor realm, they would immediately be accepted as disciples. However, Fong Qingshan was different. It was not that they looked down on him, but ordinary people did not have the qualifications to accept him. If they wanted to accept him as a disciple, they would have to at least be a god emperor. Even ordinary peak divine emperors were not qualified. However, although it required peak divine emperors, the Taoist sect did not lack them. In order to compete for Fong Qingshan, these qualified people were arguing. After all, it was easy to get 1,000 troops, but difficult to find a good general. A good master was hard to find, and so was a good disciple. Hence, it was delayed. It was the same for the sect's trump cards. Ordinary trump cards were useless to Fong Qingshan. After all, although he was only at the peak of a mortal realm, His fighting prowess was close to that of a mid-god emperor. After the eruption, he would even have the combat prowess of a late divine emperor. Many of his trump cards might not be as powerful as his eruption. Generally speaking, unless one's luck was too bad or they met a sworn enemy, very few people would break the rules and bully the weak. Especially when a peak god emperor attacked a peak of a mortal realm expert, it was really shameless. Unfortunately, if a tree didn't want its bark, it would definitely die. If a person was shameless, he would be invincible. It just so happened that Fang Qingshan and the Tao will sect caught up. Fortunately, everything was more daunting than dangerous. Even though most of the disciples had been rescued, they were still in danger. But it had to be said that this time, it caused the Tao will sect to suffer heavy losses and suffer a great loss. If it had been someone slightly weaker like the Thousand Autumns clan, this wave of damage would have been enough to cause their strength to regress by 1,000,000 years. Of course, the true core disciples like Fang Qingshan, Peng Bo, and the others were unharmed. But the elite disciples who were one level lower were not the only ones who were injured. Moreover, it wasn't just the outer sect. The inner sect, the true disciples, and many deacons and elders were not spared. The Tao sect's greatest loss was only a late divine emperor elder. However, this late divine emperor elder was not someone that Duan Wei could compare to. In terms of foundation, even Chang Lushui could not compare to him. Besides, even if Fang Qingshan, Peng Bo, and the others were rescued, except for a few lucky ones, they were all severely injured. Some of their foundations were even damaged. For example, Fang Qingshan had to deal with the 3-headed dragon emperors, then the 3 commanders, and then he captured the Eye of the Last Days. Finally, when facing Chang Lushui, he was almost forced to self-destruct. Although Zhuge Jin came in time, it was only relatively speaking. His foundation and origin were damaged. It was the same for Peng Bo. Although he was not unlucky enough to meet a peak god emperor, although he was not unlucky enough to encounter a peak divine emperor, it was still dangerous. After all, if Fang Qingshan had not discovered that the second commander could summon the Arch Executioner Saber, Fang Qingshan would not have been able to deal with them so easily. Perhaps he would have been half-crippled even without Chang Liushui's help. In order to repair their injuries and replenish their foundations, the Tao sect paid a huge price. They opened the treasure pavilion and even the secret storehouse. They took out one precious treasure after another. Many seniors walked out of the secret realm and consumed their origin energy to personally help them digest and refine the treasures. Even so, they had only been able to repair most of their injuries. After all, illnesses came like a landslide, but they went away like spinning silk. It was like that even when they were sick, let alone when their foundations were damaged. Fortunately, there were no major problems. Besides fortuitous encounters, all that was left was to rely on time. Regarding this, Fang Qingshan didn't mind at all. Being able to keep his life this time around was already a blessing from the heavens. What else was there to pray for? As for the rest of the foundation, it might be a big problem for others, but for him, it was not a big deal. It was not that his injuries had healed, but he had the eternal blessing to repair his foundation. What could be better than the eternal blessing? As long as the timeless arc advanced to the immortal realm, nothing would be a problem. On the contrary, misfortune and fortune were intertwined. He had also benefited a lot from this. This was not referring to the benefits of the fallen dragon's secret realm. Zhuge Jin had already given him all the benefits there when she brought him back. Other than the 8-gem Ru-Yi umbrella, Zhuge Jin had given him everything else, including Chang Lushui and Duan Wei's wealth. As for the 8-gem Ru-Yi umbrella, it was not because Zhuge Jin was greedy. It was for the good of Fang Qingshan. After all, this treasure was not without an owner. Moreover, its owner was quite powerful. It was fine if it fell into Zhuge Jin's hands, but if it fell into Fang Qingshan's hands, it would form a karmic connection with the 3 treasures divine emperor. This was simply a reason for the 3 treasures divine emperor to make a move. Fang Qingshan naturally didn't care about all of this. He only cared about the duck that had almost flown away after he'd obtained it. the eye of the last days. Fortunately, Zhuge Jin was a righteous person. She had not seen the true power of this treasure, so she directly returned it to Fang Qingshan. As for Chang Lushui and Duan Wei's wealth, it was a pleasant surprise. Chang Lushui was only an ordinary peak-level divine emperor, and Duan Wei was only an ordinary late-stage divine emperor. Their wealth was not rich, but that was only relative. In any case, their wealth had made Fang Qingshan very rich. At the very least, although Fang Qingshan had given up halfway on this trip, he had basically achieved his goal. Apart from the title, luck, resources, eternal divine furnace unit, and Tao value, he had everything. Moreover, when the heavens were about to bestow a great responsibility on a person, it would first torture his will and torment his muscles and bones. After going through such a great tempering, the gains were no less than the resources. Chapter 1549. Adversity makes a man grow up and prosper. Why was it that it was difficult for geniuses to emerge from a greenhouse? True experts had to go through all kinds of difficulties and dangers and emerge as the cream of the crop. Firstly, a person's potential could only be stimulated to the fullest under desperate circumstances. Secondly, knowing was easy but doing was difficult. Only by combining knowledge and action could one truly control power. Tribulations and tribulations were ways to speed up and completely control one's cultivation. Fang Qingshan's true gains this time weren't the resources and treasures. Apart from the eye of the last days, his greatest gain was actually the experience he'd gone through. He'd narrowly escaped death, fought a peak divine emperor, and almost self-detonated. These were all his trump cards, and they were sufficient to support Fang Qingshan to go further. Moreover, so long as he digested this experience, it would be extremely easy for him to break through and become a divine emperor. Of course, this wasn't the gains Fang Qingshan had mentioned before. These were his gains in the Fallen Dragon's secret realm, and the other gains Fang Qingshan had mentioned were the sect's compensation. Yes, the sect had given Fang Qingshan quite a lot of compensation this time. Firstly, everyone else had trump cards, but Fang Qingshan didn't. Even if he did, it might not be of much use. After all, although Fang Qingshan had enormous potential, it was impossible for the sect to directly give him a trump card that could deal with a peak divine emperor. But regardless of the reason, and regardless of whether it was of any use or not, it was still a problem. At the very least, others had trump cards, but he didn't. He didn't have to worry about the disparity, so the sect had compensated him. Then there was the problem of his foundation. Zhuge Jin had guaranteed that there would be no problem, but in the end, it hadn't been completely repaired. Although the remaining problems didn't matter much, they required other opportunities and time to resolve. For geniuses like them, time was of the essence. If one step was slow, then everything would be slow. On the path of the great Tao, if one didn't advance, one would fall back. If one spent time recuperating, it would be fine for a short period of time. But if one spent too long, their indomitable fighting spirit and momentum would be worn away. Although Fang Qingshan said that he was fine and that he had the timeless arc and eternal blessing, those belonged to him, not the sect. So, the sect had to compensate him. This compensation solved Fang Qingshan's urgent problem. What did Fang Qingshan lack the most? Resources? No, it could be said that what he lacked was resources. This kind of resources included cultivation resources, all kinds of natural treasures, elixirs, cultivation techniques, and all kinds of spiritual treasures. Because he'd obtained Chang Lushui and Duan Wei's possessions, coupled with the three commanders and the eye of the last days, Fang Qingshan didn't lack for cultivation resources and rare treasures. However, cultivation techniques were not something that could be obtained in a short amount of time. After all, a divine emperor-level cultivation technique was just too valuable. This was an existence that could be passed down for generations to guard the sect. One of the reasons why Fang Qingshan had gone out to travel this time was to earn Tao intent points and exchange them for divine emperor-level cultivation techniques from the Tao Palace. This time, The sect's compensation was that Fangqing Shan could study 5 divine emperor-level cultivation techniques for free. Although there were only 5 of them, their value was no less than that of a few Grade 3 supreme treasures. In addition to the 5 cultivation techniques from Chang Lushui, Duan Wei, and the 3 commanders, as well as the cultivation techniques from the Crimson Firmament realm that Fangqing Shan had obtained previously, the number of cultivation techniques he'd obtained was more than the number of fingers on 2 hands. Although it still couldn't compare to when he'd been at the Immortal Realm or Chaotic Origin Realm, it still greatly alleviated his urgent problem. Just as Fangqing Shan was hiding on the Samsara planet and organizing his gains in the Daoan Tent Pavilion, the sect master, Taoist Yi, the elder of the technique imparting sect, Zhuge Jin, the elder of many treasures, Qian Duoduo, the elder of enforcement, Zhan Tiandi, the elder of the law, Lung Jue, and the other higher-ups of the Dao Intense sect, as well as hundreds of peak divine emperors, were holding an expanded meeting to deal with the aftermath. Elder Wu Yu, tell me, exactly how much damage did our Dao will school suffer this time, and exactly which powers attacked us from the shadows? Taoist Yi's face was expressionless as he spoke to the internal affairs elder beside him. Yes, Wu Yu nodded concisely and then said unhurriedly, this time, the Dao sect has suffered heavy losses. This is the biggest loss we've suffered since the Patriarch's death. The losses are so great that it's enough to rebuild a small sect or cause a medium-sized force to be unable to recover. At this point, he paused for a moment and then directly stated the losses. We've lost more than 800 outer sect disciples, including as many as 200 elite potential disciples. These disciples are all geniuses of their time. I dare not say that they're comparable to Peng Bo, Fangqing Shan, Jiang Overlord, Xian Yuan, and the others, but once they grow up, there will definitely be people like Emperor Yan. Hearing this, everyone's expressions changed slightly. Outer sect disciples were only at the chaotic origin realm, which was nothing to them at the moment. However, this was the true bottom and foundation of a sect. After all, the inner sect, true disciples, and elders were all promoted from outer sect disciples. How could they not be heartbroken when they lost 800 disciples all at once, including 200 geniuses? However, their heartbreak came a little too early, as the following losses made them vomit blood. We've lost as many as 500 inner sect disciples, including 100 elite disciples who were expected to reach the top 50 or even the top 10 of the inner sect. Wu Yue continued without hesitation. Everyone's faces turned darker and darker as he spoke. Inner sect disciples were different from outer sect disciples. Although outer sect disciples were geniuses, they had yet to grow up. On the other hand, inner sect disciples were different. Although they could not truly hold their own, they were much more heartbroken than outer sect disciples. In terms of value, the inner sect's losses were probably at least 100 or even 1,000 times greater than the outer sect's. We've lost 80 true disciples, including 15 top-notch true disciples. These people are all reserve elders. It's not just disciples. This time, many deacons and even divine emperor elders have also fallen. Bang! After losing 3 consecutive attacks, how could everyone still sit still? Many hot-tempered elders slammed the table and stood up one after another. If they had not restrained themselves and were not in the Daoan Tent Pavilion, their anger would probably have destroyed the world. As for the forces that secretly attacked the Dao Intense sect, we now know that there are the Freedom sect, the Thousand Autumn sect, the Eternal Heaven sect, the Martial Pole sect, the Jasher Hall, the Evil Palace, the Bliss Mountain, the Fire Phoenix dynasty, and so on. The names were mentioned one by one. Just like how Wu Yue had reported the disciples' losses previously, everyone's expressions changed and became gloomier. Good. This is really great. They're treating the Dao Intense sect as a soft persimmon that they can bully at will. It seems like we've been too weak in recent years. So much so that everyone dares to bully us. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.